I'd like to call to order the Farmington Board of Education meeting for Monday, January 14th, 2019. If we can please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Then I guess we will move forward with a new item 4 on the on the agenda. Special guests, elected officials. Well, Mike, we can start with you. We'll welcome Mike D'Amico and just, welcome Mike to the table. This is something we do every year. Welcome our elected officials to come and give us sort of an overview update, what's new, what's going on. And maybe this is a good one to have because we have a change in leadership in the governor's office. And just to open it up, Mike, I mean, obviously, we have our issues with ECS funding, special ed funding, state mandates, those are always our hot button items. But if you could just sort of give us an update what's going on, and we can I'll open it up to my colleagues to ask you questions if we have any.
Okay. Well, first of all, Happy New Year to everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it. So yes, we have a new governor. I think we have a new cooperative spirit. I think hopefully everybody likes to have a get off on the right foot and have a spirit of the honeymoon period, so to speak. Revealed any details of his proposed budget. That's going to come, in February. So everyone's, anxiously anticipating that. The specific, areas that you're concerned about, ECS, this is always, an issue. As you know, the ECS formula, people have been talking about it. It needs a major restructuring and so forth. Ultimately, as you well know, it comes down to a big part of it has to do with the wealth of the individual town. It has to do with the number of free and reduced price lunches in the town. So there's several factors that go into that. I don't see any appetite to make any major changes to that, except that there's always been and I guess it will continue to be this way, that towns there's a feeling that, well, some towns get favored over other towns, and I guess you could make that argument, but the demographics of all the different towns are different. So to say that one town benefits more than another town, well, based on the formula, you almost have to do it that way, because if you're considering the wealth of the town and the wealth of the individuals within the town, then naturally you're going to get a system where proportionally more money goes to the less affluent towns. I don't see that that's going to change a whole lot. What I will tell you is that from my perspective, every year, there's a threat that things are going to, be disastrous, and I don't think, knock on wood, the disaster hasn't happened. Between Derek and I and our former, colleagues in the legislature, Senator Geritana and Senator Bai, we've always managed to fight for the suburban towns. We managed to fight for Farmington specifically, and we usually made out pretty well in the ECS funding battle that goes on every year. That doesn't really tell you anything specific, but I don't see major changes on the horizon, and I'm going to do what I always do. Derek will do what he always does, which is make sure that the towns that we represent, I represent Farmington, he represents Farmington, Avon, and West Hartford. Make sure that those towns are adequately, compensated in the process. So, as far as special ed is concerned, there's been talk about pooling resources, so that individual towns don't get hit, disproportionately. I don't know where that's going to go. I imagine that the superintendent probably knows more about that than I do. I'm not sure what the talk is among the superintendents. Do they see a pooling on the horizon as far as special ed is concerned?
I know that there is a co-op that is being proposed, but it would, it may actually cost more to do that, and there is an interaction with that co-op with ECS, taking a portion of ECS away from the town to do it. So I think the details of that co-op are something that superintendents are very concerned with. I think we are, one of the superintendent's priorities would be that the commitment to special ed funding be met, and that hasn't happened in a while where we've received 100%. We always receive around 70% of what we should receive from the state. I think the co-op is trying to get some predictability, but I think it would come at a cost. And we are just having a lot of difficulty with any additional cost to our budget, and so we'd rather see a look at statutes and a look at fully fulfilling the commitment that the state made to special ed funding for towns. That's what we're looking for. So, that is something I know it's being talked about, but there's some concerns on our side because of increased costs.
So if it comes at the expense of ECS, it's not really a great idea.
Right,
Yeah. Okay.
and
All right.
additional cost for school districts. We take great pride in Farmington, educating our students in district, trying to provide specialized programming here. Our board has supported specialized programming here to ensure our students are educated in district. They're provided an excellent education, and we do it at a fiscally responsible rate. And so we don't want to be penalized for that. We would rather see incentives for creating programming within the district for special education. So there are lots of concerns, and I think CAPS, my superintendent organization, will be sharing those concerns relative to that special education co-op that's being proposed.
All right, thank you, Derek. I know you probably got stuck in traffic on the way in. Welcome to Farmington.
Sorry for my tardiness.
No, it's fine. Just Happy New Year. We just, we're turned over the table a little bit to Mike, just to, this is something we do every year with our elected officials come in and present to us just about what's new, what's going on, what's trending at the state level, and just talking about ECS and special ed funding a little bit. So, we're just, open it up to you for some comments. Happy New Year. Welcome to Farmington, and, just get a sense. As I said, it's somewhat timely given the fact we have a new leadership at the governor's mansion. And so if you just make some comments, and we'll open it up to any discussion.
Sure. So thanks again for having me here, and apologize for my lateness. And I'm going to turn my phone off, too. That's a good, So, I won't talk very long because, I think these things for me, very beneficial to hear from you all in terms of what your concerns are, what your priorities are, and, how we can work together. So I would say that there is a sense of optimism, I think, at the Capitol. We have worked, as you all know, we have a bipartisan budget 2 years ago, and then we made bipartisan budget adjustments last year. And I really hope that paradigm continues. There is a saying that necessity is the mother of bipartisanship, right? That's not mine. I mean, and so last year and in the prior year, neither party, as you well know, could single-handedly get a budget signed into law. So we had to work together. And ultimately, I think that was a pretty good thing. I think that we got a lot of good ideas from both sides. One thing that, as you all know, that we both really, both Republicans and Democrats, cross-party line was we wanted to protect our public schools and our public education. And that's something that folks on both sides of the aisle really, came together and committed to doing. As you all know, it took too long, no question. It took till Halloween. But I do think ultimately we got to a pretty good place, and we also had some important structural reforms too that'll help us going forward. There's some things that are not so great, of course, in the budget, but overall, I think the commitment to funding our public education and to our public schools was something that was very positive. So I think to continue that, and I hope that does continue. I guess I would say there's three things I think have to happen. One is that it's incumbent upon Democrats at the Capitol who now maybe they don't have the necessity, right, in terms of, there's the numbers have changed, but that to approach the legislative session with a great deal of humility in terms of to not overestimate the mandate, if you will, and to realize that folks still really do want us to work together. And if we don't approach our friends on the other side of the aisle with humility and really in a collaborative spirit, then we can't expect them to come over. So I think that's something that I'm ready to continue to do, and I know that that Representative D'Amico is always up for that as well. And then I do hope that we can continue to find common ground on ECS, and that our friends on the other side of the aisle will. It's sometimes it's easy to say no. I mean, the budget we still have, I think when it's all said and done, we're still going to need to close about a $700 or $800 million deficit. It's not going to be the $2 billion that we were dreading, which is fantastic. But I mean, tax revenues are doing pretty well right now, and our rainy day fund is in a good place. I will say that I think Governor Lamont will not let the legislature drain the rainy day fund. I think that's a good thing, right? I mean, because we anticipate potentially, it's not going to be far off when we might see a recession. And so some folks might want to take it all right out of the rainy day fund. And I think there's some real concerns that we have about that. So you'll hear more about that, I'm sure, as the legislative session continues. But I think, again, another thing, our friends on the other side of the aisle, I think we need to all come together and all govern collaboratively. And then finally, I would just say, hold us accountable. I know you will, but residents as well, in terms of, I would ask, if it's a Democrat or Republican or whatever, to say, hey, what are you willing to compromise on? Maybe that, you, in order to get to yes, right? Because none of us want to see what happened 2 years ago, where it dragged on. It was unfair to you all. It was unfair to our students, unfair to our educators. We did pass a bill, as you probably are aware, that would prevent the governor from cutting ECS funds during the school year. The governor vetoed the bill. The legislative leaders did not call us back to override. Part of the reason is because that part, that piece that says that it can't be cut during the year is in the current 2-year budget. However, when the budget ends, right, the governor will be able to do that again unless we pass it. So, I'm ready certainly to support that, and I think that that's something that we should. Hopefully, the new governor, will not veto it. So happy to talk more about kind of the finances, but if I could kind of put that in a bow, I would say tax revenues are better. Really hoping for continued bipartisanship, and I think we're all committed to protecting our public schools. And just the other thing I did want to mention is that I just held a forum last week in West Hartford on vaping and teen use of the e-cigarettes, which and I don't have to tell you this because you see it in our schools. There's a real epidemic, I think, right now. I mean, it's 78% increase in high school use in the last 2 years, and about a 50% increase in our middle schools. And so, I've been working, and I have a lot of great support on both sides of the aisle to advance some initiatives that I think would get at that. And, there's some menu of options that we're looking at, everything from tax policy to matching. Right now, there is no tax on just a sales tax, but nothing, like the tobacco or cigarette tax. We know teens are particularly sensitive to price, so that's something we might look at. Also, you've heard a lot of talk about raising the age from 18 to 21 for all tobacco products. I think that's something, my guess is that does get passed this year. It's passed in the Public Health Committee last year, but it didn't make it fully. I've talked to some of my friends on the other side of the aisle who were kind of self-described libertarian, and they said, you know what, I'm finally there. So I do think that the tide is moving in that direction. Potentially banning flavors or getting the flavors out of the convenience stores and into at least the vape shops, the adult shops. That's actually something, not surprisingly, that the vape stores are in favor of too. And that's where a lot of minors get access to them. And then finally tightening up the online delivery. That's another thing that we'll be looking at. So it's not cooked yet. It's beginning the legislative process, but I would certainly love your insight as to what you're all seeing here and, how big a problem it is and how we can all work together to address that. So with that, I certainly don't want to filibuster, so I'll stop and, any questions or whatever, but thanks again for having me here.
Thank you, Derek. Mike, I don't know if Derek
That was pretty
interrupted your comments or anything, but,
No, look, I'm glad Derek brought it up, and I know it's something that's particularly of concern to him is the whole vaping epidemic. So I'm fully supportive of making sure that kids are safe and whatever we can do to reduce the use of those products. I'm certainly going to be in favor of, but we have to figure out a way to do it that accommodates everybody's needs and doesn't trample on people's rights and so forth. So, like everything else, the devil's in the details, but we're just getting started with this. So, but those are good ideas, I think, that have already been presented, and we'll be debating them as we go.
good. Any open up at this point? And questions, Bill?
Thanks for being here, guys. First of all, Mike, I haven't had a chance to thank you on the record for the work you did in getting those funds for the Westwoods playground. Well done. Thank you very much.
You are very welcome.
My questions really relate to high school construction programs. And really, my concerns and things you could maybe, as you go into the legislative session, one of the concerns we had when the referendum failed was that as of July 1 of 2017, I think, the funding formulas were going to change. And so that there is, as we go into the process, I think one of the unanswered questions for a lot of people in the community, and we've done a lot of due diligence on our end to kind of understand what happened in that process. But one of the things I think people want to really understand is what is the state's role in being able to provide funding? Is there a way we can enhance our ability to, maximize under the formula, change, is there a way we can modify or amend the formula in a way that would get us to a place where we get as much, and if not maybe even more than otherwise may have been expected in terms of state money? That's just a concern I have. I can't speak for the board, obviously, collectively, but that's something certainly that's on my mind.
Well, I mean, a large portion, and maybe Derek knows the percentage, but a vast amount of money, bonding money, that the bonding commission approves is for school construction. I mean, the things that get the headlines in the newspapers are well, look, they spent $20,000 on this foolish project and $50,000 on that foolish project, but the vast majority of the money, from what I understand, goes to school construction projects, which I don't think anybody would consider to be a waste of money or a boondoggle or whatever you want to call it. So I don't think that anybody in the legislature is going to be inclined to cut back on that, because everybody has to build a school eventually in their town, and so I don't think there's going to be any appetite to cut back on that. The question is, what does the fiscal situation allow us to do? Again, that formula, as you know, is based on the need, and it's based on the demographics of the town, as I understand it. And I don't think that Farmington or any of the suburban towns are going to can anticipate, getting the kind of reimbursement that some of the, less affluent towns get. I mean, that's just reality. But as far as the specific, numbers or percentages, I'm not sure where that's going to go. But I know that nobody in the legislature wants to cut back on school construction money. It's just, just like no one wants to cut back on ECS money, because we all benefit from it and we all need it, and we would all be suffering without it. I don't know if that helps.
It helps a little bit,
Yeah, I guess I would add that, I'm committed, and I know Representative D'Amico is, to sitting down with all of you and really digging in and trying to find a solution for the high school. I understand that there's a real need, and that we got to kind of pick up the pieces from the referendum and what happened, and lessons learned, and how can, right, what are some ways to make some adjustments. But I my sense is, and this community obviously better than I do, but that I think people really do understand that there is a need, and it's so important to, if you look at the future of Farmington and quality of life and attracting families, et cetera. So I get it, and I would be very eager to to schedule some meetings and really kind of get down to work to see if can the formula be adjusted, what are some other options, et cetera. So the other thing I would mention in terms of borrowing, just to kind of pick up of where Representative D'Amico left off, is that one of the things in that bipartisan budget that I just touched on was a hard cap on borrowing, which our state credit card is pretty close to being, if not maxed out, it's pretty over. Right, exactly. And at the same time, we all acknowledge that our transportation infrastructure is a disaster, right? It's one of the worst in the country in terms of roads, bridges. I think you know where I'm going with this. In terms of we have to find a way to fix our transportation infrastructure without borrowing. If we just put, and there's not even enough room on the state credit card because of that hard bond cap, but let's say we throw absolutely everything on in terms of roads and bridges, there will be nothing left for high schools and projects like this. So it's just something to think about. You're going to hear the T word a lot coming up this legislative session. And the reason I mention it is I just wanted to stress that it's all connected. We really only have so much the state can continue to borrow. And I agree with Mike that funding projects like high schools and public education are super important. So if we're going to do that, then we got to figure out a way to fund transportation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Any other questions? All right. Liz?
Well, I have a question. So something that doesn't cost any money would be...
Those are the best type.
Have you given any consideration, I think last time you were here, last year, we talked about reducing mandates or reducing, maybe taking a different look at the mandates and looking at maybe not statewide mandates and looking at different, different towns have different situations. There's 169 different towns. Every town is different. Not every town needs the same mandate. So you could reduce unfunded mandates, and that doesn't cost the state any money, but it would save municipalities money. It would save school districts money, because not every school district needs every mandate. That's a little more complicated, but it would certainly ease the burden financially on a lot of municipalities without costing the state any money. Has there been any consideration of doing any of that or looking into that?
I'm going to let you take that one.
There's been some commissions in the past. I mean, that's something that we talk a lot about, and I know there have been some that have been eliminated, but this would be a great opportunity for me actually to learn from all of you. Like, do you have some at the top of your mind where say, please get rid of X amount and this will save, Farmington taxpayers and Farmington schools a certain amount of dollars? I'm all ears, and I mean that very sincerely.
So we can have a list to you by tomorrow.
No, that's great, except we pass laws for the whole state. And
Right.
to start, moving around and say, well, Hartford has to do this and Waterbury has to do this, but Farmington is exempted. I mean, that gets a little dicey, but,
That's why I said it's complicated.
Okay.
But that's why you get paid the big bucks.
Indeed.
So, but for example, so right before this meeting, I had a curriculum committee meeting, and there is a mandate that was changed by the state for like health and wellness, right? So the mandate now is instead of 1.5, it's what? It's 2.0. And we already have a 2.0 requirement here in Farmington for health and wellness, but the way that it's allocated by the state requires us to have a little shift in our curriculum to allocate our health and wellness in a different way. So that requires us to expend some money to shift our curriculum. So even though we already have a 2.0, we now have to shift our curriculum to include wellness in a different way and safety in a different way. So it costs us money, even though we already have 2.0 as a requirement here in Farmington. So we already meet on paper what looks to be the requirement that's mandated by the state.
Right.
But we have to shift our curriculum, which, I mean, it might look like a drop in the bucket for our amount of our budget, but every little drop in the bucket adds up.
Yeah.
So that's something I can think of right off the top of my head.
Every mandate has a constituency, right? It's there for a reason. Doesn't mean it should be, but it just means it's come from somewhere. And we hear that about tax credits. People say, look, we can balance a budget by wiping out all the tax credits. And then you kind of start scratching the surface. You're like, oh, well, actually the biggest, or tax exemption, whatever, for the sales tax, that's one that comes up all the time. And the biggest one is for food. And nobody wants to tax food. And then you start kind of one by one by one. But I think overall, I mean, it's a good point in terms of we should be looking at them, right? And, why are they there and do they serve a purpose? And so, it's a great conversation to have.
I just think that if the state is unable to grant money to municipalities, perhaps there's a way to ease the financial burden on municipalities. That's all. I mean, I think that that's one way to de facto grant money to municipalities, isn't it? I mean, to ease their financial burden in some way.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to speak for you, but I think that let's have that conversation. And if you all have a list of things that you think would really move the needle on expenses, I'd love to see it. Absolutely.
I've been on a few committees where we've proposed things to move away from some of the mandates. I know it's hard because there are groups that would say, please don't do that. We worked hard to get that mandate in place. But it just in the 10 years I've been here, I can give you countless examples in our budget where we've had to say to the board, we have to add this FTE, we have to add this new program, we have to provide this now, and it's come from the state. There's definitely a shift that I've seen over time of putting, I remember before, maybe it was before I came here, there was always a real eye on school districts, and when a mandate came in, we would wait a year so that the municipality could budget in the next year. And now those mandates come within a year. I've already budgeted, and I have to move things around to fulfill that mandate. And the mandates come often and take away a lot of the local work of a Board of Ed at times. So I just think that we would be happy to provide that. I know CAPS would be happy to provide it.
Sure.
But I know that it is difficult once something's in place. People expect it to continue. But even if we could say no new mandates this year, given the financial landscape, I think that would mean a lot to superintendents and boards of ed, just to say, let's not add any more financial burden to local school districts or municipalities because of what's going on financially. It would be really helpful.
I have a new sensitivity to this, too. In September, my wife just started teaching in Canton, and she's a music teacher at the middle school. So I hear about the mandates at home as well.
Yes.
And you should know, there is new leadership now for the Education Committee in the legislature. So maybe they'll have a different perspective on the mandates. Who knows? Again, I know you're very active with the superintendent. So this might be your opportunity to start fresh.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Just a
Thank you.
Quick comment.
Yeah, Ellen?
And I know there's a lot of talk about financial burden, but it's a time issue too. Not only financial, but the time of our leadership is very valuable. It takes a lot of time. A couple years back, there was talk, I think it was Senator Bai, we were talking about, she might have been here, I forget where we were, there was talk of this same topic and taking it in more of a tiered approach. Instead of looking at the 169 towns in Connecticut, we tier them. Each town has different sizes, cities, suburban, rural, and characterized maybe in a few buckets. And when mandates come down that are, like Liz's example is perfect. We see it more than we'd like, the decisions that are made. But, it would be wonderful to see some sort of, instead of taking Connecticut towns as a whole and stamping them all with mandates, kind of breaking them out and tiering them.
Are these different from the DERGs, from the,
Has nothing to do with DERGs.
Yeah.
DERGs are completely different. It would be
Yeah.
characterizing, just characterizing cities. New Haven is very different from Farmington, and just, putting them in more of a tier. So when a mandate is being, or a statutory requirement is being developed, maybe it's a great need for Tier 1, but maybe Tier 2 and 3 don't need those guidelines.
Gotcha.
Did I explain that well?
Yeah, I think so.
Kind of adding on to that, you could just create a regime in the Department of Education that would allow municipalities to seek exemptions.
Or exemptions.
Just apply for an exemption, say, we have a 2.0, we already meet the state standard, and we don't really need.
It seems to me that doesn't a version of that already go on? Don't you have the opportunity to get exemptions, or am I mistaken?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Really?
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Okay.
No. One last thing I wanted to add, and you said something triggered something. When Senator Byer was here a couple of years ago, I remember having this conversation, going back to the school projects. If there can be a conversation, we talk about regionalization in a lot of respects, if there can be a conversation in the legislature about creating a tier, a borrowing authority between a local municipality and the state of Connecticut. In other words, a regional, it would be a county, for lack of a better way to draw an analogy, but something like that, where you could have a regional borrowing authority developed that would allow municipalities to work together to say, okay, we all recognize, so you could allow a town like Farmington, maybe even, and Montville, who, there's a consortium. We all agree there's a need. We all have these issues. We can go out to bond collectively as a borrowing entity to issue bonds in a way that's not just a burden on one particular town's taxpayer.
Gotcha.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Something along those lines where you can create this ability for towns that are in need, not to create the burden of going to the state bonding agency, but we're also not going to our referendum asking for 100, because we have not just a high school problem, but we also have a $64 million problem with our other schools. Right. And, that's going to be, that's a long game type of conversation. If we had the ability to borrow in a way that's not a specific burden solely on the taxpayers of the town of Farmington, in a collaborative way with other communities, that's one way we can, I think, address the crunch that we find ourselves in. Just a thought.
Sure. Oh, great.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, Derek, Mike, thank you very much. As always, we appreciate you coming before us, and also appreciate all your continued efforts representing the constituents of Farmington, and all your constituents. Keep working for us and on our behalf, and you're always welcome to come back here whenever you want. We gladly accept your presence here at the board, so thank you again.
I always appreciate both of you are just so collaborative and always willing to take a phone call, so I really appreciate it.
That's the right way to do business, so that's what we do.
Thank you.
All right, thank you both. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. All right, next item on the agenda, 6, consideration of the superintendent's report. 6A, preliminary technology budget for the 2019-2020 year.
Each year, we give you a preview of our technology budget, and Matt has done just such an exemplary job leading technology in Farmington. We're so fortunate. to have Matt, bringing us forward every step of the way. And I feel like we're in such great shape when it comes to technology, but that can change quickly. So we want to make sure that we're giving you a preview of the needs we have in technology now, so that it's not as overwhelming when we present the budget and we're presenting all these areas of the budget. This way you get some time with Matt ahead of time.
What a guy.
Hi.
Welcome, Matt.
I'm going to apologize now. I might ask you guys to repeat yourselves. I still don't have any hearing in this ear.
Oh, no. Matt's been-
So it's echoing a little bit. But thank you. I hope you all enjoyed the riveting screencast, which was intended to kind of give you the nuts and bolts so that we could focus more on your questions tonight. Really, this year, the drivers for the technology budget are in 3 categories, the same 3 categories that we've had over the past few years, really in licensing, data licensing applications, and licensing around network security, and then obviously in equipment or Chromebooks. So just briefly in terms of a quick summary again for everybody, we are seeing a market increase in licensing costs, our annual renewals for our operational applications. The one that immediately comes to mind are things like our finance system, our HR system. They do have regular increases that are built in. We also have 3 new products in that line this year. One being PaperCut, which we've actually been using for 2 years, but this is the first year that it's hitting our budget. We paid for 2 years up front when we first rolled that out, and PaperCut is what we're using to manage printing and copying in the district and really get our hands around and help reduce, not eliminate, but reduce the amount of printing and copying that's going on. The other 2 products that are in that line that are part of that increase are a utility that plugs into PowerSchool that's used primarily on the back end for our data specialists to help manage data fields related to ELL, special ed, and free and reduced lunch. And then the bigger item is we have a line this year for the parent app related to the bus contract. So right now we're holding at a $15,000 line for that parent app, and that's based on some research that was done ahead of time related to costs that other districts are incurring for that app. The other increased line would be network monitoring backup. We have seen an increase in cost for Gaggle. Gaggle is the service that we use to monitor our students' activity on Google Drive and in their Google email. It actually scans and alerts us for inappropriate activity as well as concerning activity. And it's been as annoying as it can be for some of our administrators, it has been helpful to have that there as a tool to be able to reach out to students in need. A lot of times students will actually journal in their Google Drive, and it gets picked up, and it's a way for our administrators to interact with them. It also scans pictures that are in their Google Drive, so we are actively engaged with our students in the appropriate use of technology around Google Drive using that tool. The other item is something that was signaled last year, which was an upgrade to the firewall. We are in the process of moving our firewall services to the Connecticut Education Network. They provide our internet connection they have for years, as well as every other school district in the state of Connecticut. They are now providing hosted firewall services at a much higher level than something we can do in-house. We will have the ability to control it, but we have their expertise and their scalability at CEN because they're now going to build that out and provide it for multiple districts. We're going with a pretty high-end firewall service that also increases our protection when it comes to network attacks, which we are now seeing quite an increase in school districts being targeted by whether it's denial of service attacks, ransomware attacks, et cetera. School districts are becoming the next prey of folks. We did have an area of efficiency this year as well. something that you guys have heard about for several years that we've kind of built out and continued to evolve, and that is our virtual desktop infrastructure. And VDI is the ability, gave the ability for our students to get to Windows-specific applications from their Chromebooks. We made an investment in it 5 years ago. The technology's advanced to the point where now we can actually contract out, and to the tune of a savings of approximately $50,000 a year, which is pretty cool. And you know, it's again, the new hosted services are still evolving, but they are tying directly into Google single sign-on, and it's becoming much easier for us to deploy and support, as well as for students to be able to access those applications where we can't do it, deploy it natively within a Chrome environment. And the last item that I touched on is related to Chromebooks. And I'm actually gonna go to the slide, because it's not necessarily for this year. It's for next year, and I am gonna come back, so we don't have to get into the weeds tonight, because there are still a lot of details that are being worked out. We've talked about this over the past couple of years. I've heard from parents, I've heard from students, I've heard from teachers. We went into Chromebooks in a cart model because it was more cost efficient at the time. Costs and needs in the classroom have started to balance, and we are positioned now based on where equipment costs are in a good place to where we could actually go to a take-home one-to-one. So I've started working those numbers, and the proposed, which would be for fall 2020, would look kind of like this. Students, it would be a 4-year cycle. Students would receive a Chromebook in 5th grade. They would keep it through 8th grade. They would receive another Chromebook, a new Chromebook, once they enter 9th grade and have it for their high school career. We would utilize existing inventory as we enter into this in the fall of 2020. Again, knowing that we have devices that are only 1, 2, 3 years old. Those would get distributed out to the appropriate grade levels. I've talked with colleagues in other districts. All districts that have gone into this one-to-one program have done an opt-in insurance program, and that helps defray the cost of repairs. That the insurance is usually set at an affordable price and covers a device up to the value of replacement. And it's a lot of working with parents as you're going through. Not everybody opts in right off the bat, but I've had several stories from my colleagues where a student will come in with a cracked screen, and it's $150 to replace the cracked screen. The parent didn't take out the insurance. They call up, talk to the parent, say, hey, it's $35 to opt in, and the insurance is going to cover it. And usually folks will opt in. It's always a give and take, and it's a community effort in all of the districts that I know have gone this route. As far as what we do with the Chromebooks at the end of the 4 years, we're still on the fence. A 4-year-old device is not worth very much. Might be worth something to the kid who's had it for 4 years. There's some logistics in terms of, okay, what do we do in terms of deprovisioning? But those are some of the details that I'm still talking with colleagues about. What have they seen in their district? What's going to be the best thing? Are we looking at, having a collect back event at the end of the 4 years? The bottom line is, going into this is not a significant increase to the district's budget. Again, the equipment costs have come down. This year alone, we saw even the device that we deployed this year come down to around the $200 mark. There's a little bit of hesitation this year based on talking with some vendors around the trade agreements and foreign taxes, because all of these devices are coming from outside of the United States. But even a conservative estimate says that these Chromebooks are now in the $220 range, which is significant. When we went into this 7 years ago, we were purchasing Chromebooks around the $300 range. Yeah. So they've come down quite a bit.
And we have enough inventory to do that? One-on-one take home?
Existing plus the new. So we're still looking, the annual purchase is a couple hundred more. But if we were to just look at annual purchase, so we've been buying around 700 units a year. We're looking at somewhere between 700 and 800 units a year to do the 5th and 9th grade each year. And then we'd have to buy a small portion to continue. At the K-4 level, we would continue with classroom carts. We'd have to continue to replace a small portion each year at the K-4 level. But again, based on costs coming down, the balance still works out to about the same amount of expenditure.
And
With that,
Matt, just, the $35 as a parent would be the best $35 I probably ever spent. But also as a parent, and maybe Kim, this is better directed to you, but is there an effect on curriculum and teaching and learning if the kids are forgetting, because my child would forget their Chromebook? And how, is there an impact relying on students to bring in their Chromebooks, and how would it affect teaching and learning maybe?
Well, Matt and I haven't talked about all the details of this, but I would suspect that we would have some Chromebooks in the classrooms or in the hallways in a cart that could be accessible to individual students for that reason. And all of the, programs that they're using, it doesn't really matter if they're logging in on their own device, they're accessible. So I would say that would be the primary answer.
yeah, most districts will have a small stash of Chromebooks on hand for the student whether it's a student that comes in with one that's not working or whether it's a student that forgets it. In most cases, because we're issuing these to the students, they are taking more ownership, and it's something that's vital to their daily lives as well. It's kind of like their cell phone.
Yeah,
They don't.
home without it.
Right. There's the occasion.
My son's cell phone is usually not in very good condition.
Yeah, there's the occasion, but today we actually have carts in the library here where students can check out a Chromebook for a period or for the day or even to take home for an evening. We would continue with the same. Some districts have gone strict and said, nope, it's yours, it's your responsibility. The same thing with power adapters. We'd probably keep a couple power adapters around for students that didn't charge theirs overnight. But again, it develops an amount of responsibility in the student as well, that this is a tool that's key to their academics. And most districts I've talked to, there's very little in the way of issues around students not coming in prepared. The other thing piece that we would be looking at is I have already started to look at some new tools around safety and security that tie into the Chromebooks that would follow the students home as well. So again, we don't have to deal with a lot of that today. We do have certain measures in place on students' Google accounts that follow them if they log into another device that's not ours. But I'm actually looking at some tools that, again, follow the device that we're issuing to them and follow them home, that provide us with a slightly elevated level of security. And just as a simple example, one of the things that we would be looking to do is these devices would only be accessible from an @fpsct.org account. So a student bringing this home could not log in with a personal account. They would only be able to log in with their school account because it's a school resource. So
And would there be a need-based funding if someone couldn't afford the insurance program?
we're looking at that as well, yeah.
Ellen, yeah.
Are at Irving Robbins in the high school, are students bringing in their own devices, iPads or laptops? I forget if that happens.
We, not necessarily, mostly at the high school. We don't see too much in the way of BYOD at Westwoods or Irving Robbins. In most cases at Irving Robbins, even if they do bring a device in, they're not necessarily allowed to use it in the classroom anyway. We do see a decent number of students coming in with a device at the high school level.
Oh, but they're not using them in the classroom?
Not always,
Study
no,
hall and- yeah.
no.
Liz?
Well, this might be better for Kim, I don't know, but Matt, you might know. What would be the, like, an academic or curricular benefit to having students bring the device home? Like, versus the way it is now, and having them use their own device at home?
Well, not everyone has one at
Right.
home. Not everyone's device at home is loaded with the same, tools that they're using in the classroom. Some things are accessible, internet accessible, a teacher's website or the interactive syllabus that a teacher creates is certainly accessible, but this would make it seamless, across all platforms.
A lot of the stuff we hear is not necessarily about home. It's the between school and home.
Yeah.
It's the students that have some time, but they don't necessarily have the resource with them between school and home. So whether it's the bus, it's after school care, it could be an after school activity where they have 15 minutes where they're sitting there and they could be doing some of their schoolwork. A lot of it is that in between time.
That's actually a good point, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I kind of like that. If everything that they're doing is on there, providing them with the tools to do it seems like a good idea.
Michelle?
Can you go back to the VDI? Is that
Yeah.
what you called it? I'm a little confused about what we're using that for, what you said. It's helping us access applications that we're using at school?
So virtual desktop infrastructure is VDI.
Oh, okay.
It's a way, so when we went to Chromebooks,
Yeah.
not all software runs on a Chromebook.
Correct.
Some software is
You know.
still Windows-centric. Not so much anymore, but Microsoft Office was only Windows at the time. It's now you can access it through a Chromebook. But as a simple example, we'll take Microsoft Word. The VDI allowed us to run Microsoft Word on a Chromebook
Got it.
in a virtual session. A lot of the software that we're running using that infrastructure is supporting our engineering programs, our science and engineering programs. So we just launched a protein mapping application for the biology class. It's a Windows-only program. You can't get it for Mac, you can't get it for Chrome. It only runs on Windows. Now our students can access it from a Chromebook, from anywhere. The same is true with several CAD programs, things that support the PLTW program.
Okay, thank you. I'm with you on that now.
Mark?
About like the security issue that you brought up before, that there's a lot of hackers, things are getting much more sophisticated out there.
Correct.
How does it work in terms of, hey, somebody graduated a couple years ago, they've done all the work on a Chromebook, are they still susceptible to hackers breaking into account? Like, is there a storage for work that's been done or accounts that are no longer in use or students who no longer go to the school? Is it deleted? Is it moved to another server? What's the security on that? Because, I think everybody's read these articles about exposure data, and I think the worst thing as a parent would be to find out, hey, all of our kids' data has been hacked and it's out there for everybody to read. Regardless of what it is, it's still your kid's data. So what happens to old data? Kids are out of school, or even current data, maybe the difference between the two.
So I'll talk to, the quicker piece is the old data, or the graduated students. We used to keep graduated students' accounts open for a year. About 2 years ago, we scaled that back to a half a year, to December. The recent legislation around data privacy from the state has forced us to take another look where we're actually turning graduates' accounts off in July. When we roll to the next school year, their Google accounts are automatically turned off. That said, they can contact us and we can reactivate, and we give them instructions to use a tool right within Google that allows them to pack up their materials and they can migrate it to a personal account. Once they've graduated, post 18, it's their stuff. Most of the laws and regulations on us as a school district don't apply, but we do give them the tools to migrate their materials outside of our domain. As far as students within our domain, we have mechanisms in place for Google. Google for Education is a different model than if you were to go out and sign up for a Gmail account on your own. There are different rules and regulations that govern Google Apps for Education, down to where they are not mining the data within an education account. They don't put pop-up ads when you're in there on your education account. There are certain applications that we can't roll out to the students because they are not covered under the terms and agreements of Google Apps for Education. And the same, there are certain applications that we have to be careful about the age at which we make those available to students, because some of them aren't by terms and agreements aren't available to students under 13. Some aren't available to students under 18. We have backup mechanisms in place. We have security mechanisms in place through Google to help with ransomware, phishing attacks, et cetera. Again, a lot of it is things are evolving so quickly that we're trying to keep up with some of the newer attacks. Google does a pretty good job of preventing the majority. Most of what we see in terms of attacks on our Google accounts are phishing attempts. Or it's the email that says your Apple account is due to expire. Click here to reset your password. And we do a lot to send information out to both students and staff to educate them on, hey, beware of such and such. And a lot of times it comes in waves. We'll see, they'll blast it out to 500 people in the domain, and I'll usually get a couple emails over a weekend or an evening from a teacher or from a kid that says, hey, this doesn't look right. Just wanted you to know that we got that. And then we send a communication out to folks. The firewall and security stuff is more, that's network level, and it's not necessarily stuff that's going after your data in particular. It's more along the lines of creating chaos. So it may be something like locking up machines, or they may try to lock up files. Luckily, we haven't had to deal with that stuff. That's the thing. I mean, we've got the right tools in place, and that's part of why I've looked to CEN, because I know they've got the next level of tools as these things become more advanced. I want to make sure we've got that, both the expertise and the tools in place to help prevent those.
Right.
One
Obviously, the concern isn't whether somebody would be spreading your child's spelling test, grades around, but it would be more along the lines of, IEPs, things of personal nature, personal data, things for kids who are receiving, special needs, IEPs, like I said, or 504s or anything to that nature. So that would be the real concern, more so than just graded tests. So I don't know if there's a difference in how we handle that data versus just straight up student accounts with, are those things separated from students' accounts?
Yeah, we have both workflow measures as well as security measures in place on sensitive data. And there's laws and rules that regulate all of that for us in terms of what we're required to do, as well as document. Those systems are protected by several levels of security.
Great. Thank you.
Any additional questions for Matt? Well, thank you, Matt.
Thanks.
As always, you always put us in good hands. Technology is an intimidating subject, I think, for most of us. So let me ask you one last question quickly. I mean, technology changes so quick. Is there anything in your crystal ball that the board should be considering, 2 years down, 3 down? Where's technology taking us?
There's a couple, again, and that's why, we talk about the licensing costs, and a lot of stuff is moving to, you hear a lot of folks talk about the cloud. The cloud can be a little scary. Going to the cloud does not necessarily mean giving up control, though. So what we're seeing is a lot of shifts in technology going to what I refer to as hosted services. So our data may live outside of the physical environment here in the school district, but we have full control over it. It's just that it's not physically present, the system's not physically present, and there's cost efficiencies with that. A lot of companies are moving their services that direction, whether it's us that are purchasing services to host it for ourselves, or whether it's us contracting with a company for an application. The majority of these services are going to this cloud-based model or a hybrid model, which means you may have a piece of equipment here on site, but it's also got a sister out in the cloud, and that's for redundancy and failover. The other piece that's starting to crop up again, and it was interesting, it was on 60 Minutes last night too, is the artificial intelligence stuff. There's a lot of cool things that are happening around that. We haven't gone down this road, but there's been a lot of chatter on the tech director's listserv about teachers requesting the ability to put Amazon Dots in their classroom for educational purposes, because they can, whether it's timers for the kids, could be background music, it could be they're going to play a game, an educational game, could be Jeopardy, could be something like that, could be as simple as a kid asks a question, the teacher doesn't know the answer, and sends the kid over to ask Alexa, and they get this, the whole class gets the answer and they learn something. There's downsides to that, and there's a lot of hesitation. Most of the tech directors that have answered these questions have said, absolutely not, not happening right now. And it's around the fact that those types of devices are constantly listening in. It's not just activating when you're asking a question, but
aren't we a Google environment? Like, why would?
we are, but again, because we're Google Apps for Education, there's different regulations. So we don't have the Google Home devices that might be actively listening. Your Chromebook's not actively listening as you're doing things. There's different rules and regs. Consumer devices are a totally different story. And that's why we most of us have not entered into it. But the evolution of artificial intelligence is interesting. And I'm kind of foreseeing there might be some cool stuff on the horizon as it relates to that.
They're going to talk to their Chromebooks eventually.
Yeah. They'll want to.
Yeah.
They already try
It's
to.
a dot.
Yeah. But it's hard to tell how quickly it'll come to K-12. That's the thing.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Matt, as always. Okay, at this point, I'm going to ask to have a motion in order to accommodate some guests we have tonight. We're going to move, if we can, have a motion to move item 8B, review of revisions to policy 514.21, administration of medicine, and make that the new 6B on our agenda.
Motion? Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so now we will move, next item on the agenda, the new 6B, which will be review of the revisions to policy 5141.21, administration of medications.
So I'll call up Dr. Ziogas, our medical advisor, Sue Beardsley, Director of Health Services, and Ted Donahue, our Assistant Director of Special Services. They're all here today to provide some information on changes that we're proposing to our administration of medications policy. And first, we want to welcome them to the table and thank them for all of their hard work and support. And it's always nice to take time each year to spend time with all of you. And so I thought if you turn to page 13 of this policy, you'll see in bold italic the changes. And we did go over this with our policy committee, but we thought it's probably best if our guests just kind of give an overview of what we're seeing districts moving toward, just given the context of what's going on when it comes to use, opiate use and things like that. We want to make sure that we are fully prepared in our schools, and we know that other school districts have done this, so. And I know that you are not feeling well today, so thank you so much for being here.
This is unbelievable. How is it that the health nurse, the director of the health services, has a double ear infection? It's been to the ENT, and I'm going, I have to be here, no matter what.
Thank you.
So my ability to hear, I have a new appreciation for the hearing impaired. This is, and I'm not catchy, everybody, just so you know. I'm so excited to be here. This is quite the opportunity for us to take a look at bringing a medication into the schools for the safety of adults, which has hit the national scene, obviously, throughout the nation and the world. I'm going to have, because I can't really hear, I'm going to have to kind of, thank goodness I have Dr. Ziogas, our medical director here, and I so apologize for this. This wasn't well planned.
So you'd like me to talk?
Yeah, please,
All right.
because I.
So nationwide, it's an epidemic. And it's not just any particular community that's affected. It cuts across all socioeconomic stratuses. The numbers of people who are addicted to drugs, and it's easy to get addicted to drugs, have tripled in the last just few years. It's huge. Doctors have really tried to cut back on the numbers of narcotics that we write for our patients. It's rare to write for Vicodin. We now know that ibuprofen and acetaminophen work almost just as well as those other medicines, and they're not fraught with the same risks of addiction after only a few doses. So we're seeing enormous numbers. Even though doctors are cutting back on their prescription drug use, the numbers are increasing. And there's also synthetic opioids that are out on the market, and their other drugs that they're buying are laced with fentanyl, and there are inconsistent amounts of medication in some of those. So we're seeing more and more overdoses and deaths in this country. I think it was the leading cause of death in the last several years. Across the country, I belong to the Council on School Health, which is the American Academy of Pediatrics School Health Council. Pretty much across the country, it's uniform that everyone that's on this council supports the use of Narcan in schools. I'm the school medical advisor for the School for the Deaf and also for the CREC schools. Although we could potentially see this in our high school students or even in our middle school or junior high school students, it's likely to be seen in staff or people that are delivering services to school systems. Almost every state, you can check with the laws. I tried to check with all the states, but nearly every state, if not every state, allows people to go into a pharmacy and purchase Narcan without a prescription. Anybody that wants it should get a prescription. Anyone who has a family member that has a problem with drugs should have this in their home. You should have this in your home. I have a little family here in Farmington. The grandparents came in and found the mother not breathing and administered Narcan. Thank the Lord. They went to the pharmacy and bought the Narcan. These two little girls in my practice are not motherless because the grandparents delivered Narcan that was not given as a prescription medication. You saw what happened on the West Haven and the New Haven Green this past year when everyone on that green got something that was more than they wanted in the same day. It's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. It's important that we protect our students. In the last 10 years, I had 2 IV heroin users that were students here at Farmington High School. I mean, it's hard to believe. Sometimes I pinch myself. It's everywhere. Heroin used to be very expensive, and now it's cheap. It's cheap. But so are the drugs that are in people's cabinets. I mean, kids go into their parents' cabinets, their friends' parents' cabinets, and take the opioids out. So we should protect our kids. That's what we're here for. But it's also going to be protecting the staff and maybe other people that might step foot onto this campus. It's simple. It's easy. It's protected by the Good Samaritan laws. It's a purchase. Sue has the numbers maybe, but it's not that expensive.
And the safety, we're using that also with infants.
It's a safe medicine. I've used it lots of times, but I never used it in a drug overdose in an older person, only in the delivery room. When in the olden days when I was in my residency, sometimes moms got a fair amount of pain medication, and the baby came out depressed from the use of medication during the course of delivery. So we'd give the babies a little injection with Narcan, and boom, they woke right up. They were fine. You know, we used it in tiny little babies. So it's very safe. And everyone is protected with the Good Samaritan laws for use.
So, Doctor, would it be safe to assume that this is the standard of care? Reasonable?
Yes, it's a reasonable standard of care.
Question, oh, sorry.
Oh, I didn't raise my
Sorry.
hand.
I just had a quick question that I didn't consider in the policy meeting, but shouldn't we have an effective date? Just because, it would be effective the day after a second reading, and wouldn't that be logistically difficult for us to have this in place the day after the second reading? So, we could.
Well, we need to order it.
Yeah, so shouldn't
And we
we
need your
say,
license.
effective July 1, 2019? Just because we want to give ourselves some time to get this in place. I had thought about that as I was thinking about the meeting. We just have to be, planning for that.
Michelle?
So how much is the right amount to keep on hand?
Right now, there's a program in place for secondary schools that's free because of the nature of the medication and that we need to really think about this really strongly. So they're offering that free to secondary schools. It's $95 for a 2-packet dose. And I would encourage a nasal spray. It's very simple, very easy to administer, like an over-the-counter nasal spray for ear infections and everything else. It's that simple, but it's a $95 per 2-packet nasal spray, and the delivery is a simple nasal spray.
So my question was more, how much of an inventory should you keep? Not-
Oh, I see, I'm so sorry.
Yes, okay.
I would be recommending 1 packet for each school, which would be the ability to give 1 dose, and should the person encourage, we would be able to administer the second. At that point, we can make it a reorder.
Okay.
Any questions?
How long
Chrissy?
This would be something that the nurses would be administering? Or
I can't hear.
The nurses would be administering it.
or anyone?
No,
is it available?
Right, my recommendation at this point would be, I would be recommending that it's housed in the nurse's office, and the nurse would be delivering, because she would be making the assessment. The call would come into her. She would then make the assessment and then deliver the medication with a 911 immediately following.
Mark?
And how long does how long does Narcan last? Is there an expiration on it, or is it?
There's always an
replaced every
expiration
month?
date on drugs. If you didn't hear what happened with our epinephrine pens, the manufacturer had a problem in production, and the Food and Drug Administration gave us a 4-month extension on every expiration date on every EpiPen this past year because they were having difficulty with production. And I tell everybody an expired EpiPen works better than no EpiPen, but there is an expiration date.
Right now, the medication, by looking it up through the pharmacies, it'll give you a year from the date that when we order it. Say we order it in July, we would expect minimally that the expiration would be July of that following year.
So is this something that like all high schools are doing right now?
I can't hear.
Is this?
Yes, I can say that most high schools are doing this.
Across this
Across
state,
the-
we're being highly encouraged, and that's part of the, across the state of Connecticut.
Across the state,
Because of the nature of,
this disease, this condition.
So is the recommendation that it's at every school, including all the elementary schools, or just the high school and IAR? What's is there like?
Is it all?
For all schools?
All schools, really?
Not
right
just,
now.
not just the high
In
school?
Farmington?
In Farmington.
Yeah.
Staff?
Or
You
rec-
were
We not
recommending
have it
it,
right now in
No.
any
No.
of the schools.
The
This would be a
recommendation.
budget
Oh.
item yearly.
all schools,
And
correct?
yours
Ted?
would be,
I would
It would be
recommend-
for, so Mark, it would be for, the recommendation would be for,
All
that it would be supplied in all schools because of visitors, potentially a parent, another adult, a staff member,
an adult.
anybody who
that
came
walks
into the building.
Kristen?
Can I, so I completely support and understand why housing this in the nurse's office and having the nurse kind of oversee the ongoing, but I would think that some of our biggest risk comes at things like after-school activities, having people on campus for other types of things. If the nurse isn't available, does this make more sense to have, like, in a trainers, like sports trainers back? Like, I'm just asking if it makes sense to broaden this a little bit, or, and again, maybe our first venture with this is in the nurse's office, and see if that brings us any other risk or something like that. But just curious as to your thoughts on that.
The feeling of the experts, the CDC, is this should be freely available where there is potential for overdose, because it's a growing national problem. The logistics for this school system to try to supply it for after school and who's going to give it, it's a 5-minute training. It's a 5-minute training, and it's protected by Good Samaritan laws. No one can ever be prosecuted for not doing it right. But it's a simple thing to do. I don't know how to get the logistics for all the after-school programs, or where to make it available, where you won't have some little kid climbing up in a cabinet and, just spraying it around the room. I don't know.
Understood.
Give
Thank
people
you.
access to the nurse's office.
Andrea?
Which is
So right now, the plan would be to just have the nurse trained?
The nurses know how to do this.
Okay.
They can administer that. They
Yes.
can administer IM, sub-Q.
Yeah, so if the nurse wasn't available, they're.
It's a 5-minute training for whomever else is
But that's what I'm saying,
designated.
is there, like,
Often-
is there
Is there a
building
plan
on
to
what
do?
Christine was asking, will there be other staff trained?
They can be trained, and it's a 5-minute training. And usually a principal is a delegate if there's not a nurse available.
Because I was thinking, what if a nurse was absent that day?
If there was ever a nurse, starting with the nurse, we always have another nurse as a backup. So we have a nurse in every school that would be able to deliver the medication at this point. And yes, I do hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that's something we would want to look at in consultation with Kathy, about the after-school activities when the nurse's day is done, to ensure that we could support students or anyone in a crisis like that.
This really specifically talks about the school nurse, and that would then really just cover the school day when the nurses are here. But I do see, as we continue, to move forward, that, if there are opportunities, I think this is, a big step for us. And then, we can talk about in the future potentially thinking about athletic events maybe, but, it would have to be an adult that would administer it, and we'd want it to be secure. So at this point, this policy change is really the school day. And, that's where we are right now. But it makes sense, I think of large athletic events or concerts and things, but the nurse is not there, is not present at that time. This is very specific about the school nurse.
So I think the Farmington Police are carrying, though, as
Yes,
well.
Farmington
So if we were to
Police
have a larger event, we may
Yeah.
have a police officer on site who is also carrying. Okay.
Liz?
So I just want to get back to the effective date. Would it be your recommendation, well, let me ask the first question first. So how long would it take, let's say the next reading we have of this, and let's say that everything goes as planned and we approve it, how long would it take to get the Narcan ordered and to the
Get it as
schools?
fast as,
Well, I don't mean as fast, just like in the regular course of business, like we're not rushing anything, just in the regular course of business.
we're dealing with, working with setting up obviously a budget and having it ordered. I would imagine within a month, we could easily and that's a good guesstimation. We should be able to obtain it.
Okay, and is it your recommendation that, is it something that you wanted to have for the next school year, or were you coming here hoping that we would have this sooner? Like, what is your recommendation?
I would defer that to you.
I think that physicians think it should be available everywhere. But I understand that it takes time.
I
That
like the
takes time.
flow, if it's a year, I like the flow of a July 1, only because
Of the
it
reading.
makes sense. I think if you were to get it in May, then to remember and make sure we then reorder the next May. July 1 is one of those very natural, it's the next year, and we have to order medication.
And if there's any kind of
so,
delay, we have some
yeah, it just
buffer.
Right,
seems
and that
right.
makes sense because it's, right, exactly. So
And that would support our annual standing orders
Right.
that we would then
Yes.
That
have
would
Dr.
be-
Ziogas.
Reviewed every year.
Right, and
does that
That would
every
be
year, and
great.
that's the date that I use, the July 1st date.
Okay, good. So that's fine. Okay, good. Thank you.
I would just like to say, my one concern if we were to do something like this would be that I would definitely want think that more than one person should be trained. I don't think it should just be the nurse. I understand Good Samaritan, you're saying that it is covered by that, but there's always, different situations. So I don't think that it should just fall on one person in the entire building if we did decide to do something like this.
Well, our
It's
principals
quick.
are trained with other medications, EpiPen,
Right.
things like that. There are additional individuals. I'm not sure if this policy considers that, but we can look into it for the next reading to make sure that that's covering if we did have, say, a nurse is out at lunch or something, and there's a backup person, and usually there is, I know when I was a principal, I was a backup, and my assistant principal was a backup for all medications in case a student needed,
I think item 3 is rather specific. We should probably look at that.
Yeah, so
to
we'll
see if
look at
it's-
and just.
Yeah, exactly. I just feel like
Yeah,
there
this.
should be more
Because
than,
it says a school nurse.
This language does come from Shipman and Goodwin, but we will definitely just check to see if we need to be more specific.
Or more general.
Or more
It's
general.
more
general,
specific
yeah.
in saying,
No,
or
yeah.
trained designee, or something
Right.
like that. We still want it to be specific enough that it's not something that's assumed 24/7.
Yeah.
We can't make it that.
yeah, it has to be, and it should be more than one.
I think actually, if you're going to talk about Excel, that should be adopted by the Excel program, or this should not be necessarily done by us, right? That could be, Excel's proprietary. They're like their own entity.
No, they're part of Farmington.
Well, I know they are, but they run their,
So then they would need to have somebody in there trained as well.
Right.
If they're going to be offering or having it.
Yeah.
but they have to have talk to
Right,
a
so,
designee of some kind.
again, we can look into that, but I think for our first policy change, we were trying to make this step forward without, going beyond the school day, but we can definitely, I appreciate the feedback, and we can look into all of
really
those
wonderful.
questions. Yes.
Michelle?
A quick question. What you're saying and what I'm reading, how do you spell it? Because I'm reading something in the.
Naloxone.
Okay.
Oh,
Because you're saying something different.
We're saying the brand name is Narcan.
Narcan.
But the generic
Okay.
name is naloxone.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay. Thank you, Doctor, Sue, Ted, thank you very much for coming.
We appreciate
it very much.
Thank you for,
Feel better.
thank you, everyone. I didn't plan this one well. You've never planned these, but.
All right, if I can have a motion to approve the first reading of revisions to policy 5141.21, administration of medication.
Motion?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, approved. Okay, next item on the agenda will be the new 6C, Goal Development Update.
So, as you know, we've launched our year-long process of updating our vision of the graduate and board goals. So we're going to be engaged in a stakeholder process to update our vision of the graduate and board goals. And it's surprising that 10 years will have gone by in 2020 since we initiated a vision of the graduate. Many districts are now just beginning to craft a vision of the graduate, so we were really pioneers in developing that many, many years ago. And in the last time we did do this, we engaged all stakeholders, and we felt that that was a really important process, and we would like to replicate that. So Kim just handed out
a timeline, and I don't know, Kim, if you want to say a few words about the timeline. It does include different stakeholder groups.
Absolutely. So our district administrative team just had our annual winter retreat for a full day, and we really focused most of the day around beginning to launch our thinking about where we're headed, and what kinds of resources we want to look to help inform our thinking into the future. We read a marvelous piece that was focused on education for the graduates of 2030. Oh my gosh, 2030, our current first graders. So it's hard to even wrap your head around. What do students need to learn to be the adults and the movers and shakers of the world in 2030? But that's our task, and we're up for it, and we're excited about it. So we started our own thinking, and we're looking forward to engaging you in that process as well. So this timeline really shows you that between January 2019 and the spring of 2020, we'll kind of have a back and forth dialogue with the board, with stakeholder groups, with the administrative team, and you know, through that work, begin to refine and define what we are hoping for and what we're going to now promise to our students and our parents and our community that we are prepared to do for our children and the future of this country and the world. And it's an important set of actions that we're going to take, but we're very excited about it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Any questions? Okay, thank you, Kim. I guess we'll stay tuned and look forward to everything that's coming. It'll be exciting. Okay, next item, the new 6D, Engaged Learning Update.
East Farms has highlighted, has a highlight about anchor tasks in mathematics, and anchor tasks promote all elements of our vision of the graduate. So that was a nice example. Farmington High School is highlighting a STEM club that they have at the high school that has been visiting Westwoods and providing mentoring and information relative to STEM. West District highlighted a Curl Up and Read initiative for kindergartners, bringing parents, students, faculty, and staff together at West District. Union highlighted, I've never heard of this before, but a Rockies Recommitment Day, where they recommit to the beliefs of the school and their shared goals together. IAR Superintendent Award recipient Anastasia Verbo is highlighted in the Engaged Learning Update, and you can read more about this extraordinary student. She'll be highlighted at a board meeting in June and celebrated with our seniors who would be receiving awards at that time. At Noah Wallace, they are sharing information about their challenge and support block, and you may remember that when we did a special services review, one of the recommendations was to create challenge and support blocks at our schools, and we have them in either piloting or really well on their way, K-8. So we're really excited about that, and it gives our students a lot of choice and self-direction, helps them to catch up on things they need to work on. It's very much aligned to mastery-based learning, and students are also engaging in a lot of challenge and things that extend our curriculum. So it's really an exciting new element of our school day. And PJ Day was celebrated in our Engaged Learning, and Christy was, one of our board members, was someone who brought that to our schools, and I think we raised over $4,500.
Yeah, we broke a record.
Yeah,
We're the
so-
third highest in the state this year.
Yeah, so thank you, Christy, and thank you to our schools. And also, there's a highlight in here, which I'm really excited about. It's Junior Achievement Entrepreneur Challenge, and one of our teams from FHS won.
Oh, wow.
So really exciting. So those are all the Engaged Learning updates.
Thank you. Next item, 6E, professional appointments, retirements, resignations. We have
So we have two appointments, and we have one appointment, both are filling vacancies, and one as at Westwood's SLC, and the other is an FHS Spanish teacher. Excited to fill those positions.
Okay, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda, 7, unfinished business, 7A, budget impact, budget update. Vince?
First thing I'm going to mention is the health insurance trend. So over the past couple of years, I've come to the board and talked a lot about stop loss and how stop loss has been one of the drivers. That's not a driver this year, thankfully. However, unfortunately, our trend with claims is not as good as it has been the past couple of years. I started seeing something over the past month, and then recently when I've started having intense conversations with our healthcare consultant, Steve Scholl, looking at getting projections for budgeting purposes, it's coming more to light. So I do want to bring it to the board's attention that it's not trending as well as it has been. So I'll be doing a lot of monitoring on that topic.
It will definitely be a budget driver in the
Definitely will.
2019, 2020 budget.
And that's a frequency, not severity issue? Is that we're just seeing higher
Correct.
frequency?
Yeah. A number of claims that are not quite at stop loss, but just below it. And let's hope it's just a blip, and hope that doesn't, develop into anything further.
We also, just because I think it's important to say, and I know Vince will often remind me, we have a bit of a challenge when it comes to budget because our policy year starts in September. So we just get started in a policy year, and we're already starting to forecast for a budget that really the policy year is September, and it's just difficult to really see where our claims are trending by the time we're setting a budget because of the change in policy year. And we used to have a policy year that started July 1. We pushed it to September because of the high deductible HSA. And I just think that, the board should know, as we're going through the budget process, that that's just a challenge. It's a challenge even if we had a policy year July 1. But to have one that's September 1 really gives us a challenge during trying to develop a budget for the coming year.
Exactly, because we just don't have that much data to work on. The second thing, I've been saying this all this school year, the special services lines, especially evaluations, consultations, special education, nursing, and aides, all have pressure on the budget this year. And we spend a lot of time, myself and Dr. Singer, talking about this topic. It's talked about weekly at the central office level, so it's something that we're constantly looking at, but it is a driver to the budget. Over the past couple of weeks, we have made a total of 6 state DAS school construction grant applications. We've applied for the roof project at IAR. We've applied for the roof project at Union. We've applied for 3 security vestibules at 3 schools, and the West District main office move and security vestibule. So those applications are all with the state now, and they're in the state process. And when we are talking about the capital budget in just a little while, we have Rusty Malik who's here. Rusty Malik and Angela Cahill, one of Rusty's team members, are the architects that are assisting the board with these applications and all of these projects, as we're going to be doing. Tim is going to be doing some significant projects this summer. But all of that is on the road. Those are the budget updates that I have.
Thank you, Vince. Any questions? Yes, Alan?
So Vince, just a housekeeping question. So as far as the new news on self-insurance being a driver and the new news on special ed being a driver, how long have you known, have had this information?
Special
A couple
education?
weeks? Both? or each?
Special education all school year. I think I've been talking
Okay.
about special education things at each one of the board meetings.
Insurance?
With the self-insurance, I think it's been developing over the past couple of months now, but I really saw it this past month.
So this month, the past month, okay.
Yep.
Anything further? Mark?
As far as the claim trends, did we get a breakdown of the types of claims from Steve at some point? Like trends that are taking place? Like, is there any more specific data that we get? I mean, maybe not as a board, but that Steve breaks down to the business office to identify new trends if there's
I don't
something
get
developing?
specific claim information from Steve, but Cigna comes and gives a very detailed update, and it's going to occur in a month from now. They come annually. We also can reach out to Cigna and talk with them about this topic, but they come and deliver something to Amy Barrett and I, which is very detailed, and we look at the different areas that are of concern, and then Cigna gives us ideas of different areas that we can work with the Wellness Committee to try to improve some things, or with the Negotiations Committee that we would want to get into our bargaining contracts. So
That's kind of what I'm asking, is like if there's trends to address in the future, or because you're saying they're coming in below a specific line for us, and I just didn't know if you're seeing a lot of those, what they would be, and if we'd get that information at some point, like, to work with it. Okay.
And I can definitely ask for more information too from them.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
But you should know that the negotiations committee and, recent negotiations, thanking our staff for their partnership. We do have some design, policy changes that we're going to make, which will have savings. And I think, it's just so timely, given some of the challenges we're facing with claims. So, really successful negotiations and partnership with our staff.
Additional questions for Vince? Okay, thank you, Vince. Okay, next item, 7B, approval of revision to the policy 2410, retention of electronic records and information, second reading. If I can have a motion to approve the revisions to policy 2410, retention of electronic records and information.
Motion. Second.
Okay.
These are just
Yeah, so you have statutory changes, so any questions, comments? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, and, I'm sorry. Then item 7C, approval of revisions to policy 4120, reports of suspected abuse or neglect of children, second reading. If I can have a motion to approve?
Motion. Second.
Okay, any questions, comments? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Because the graduation will take, that will take.
Okay, all right.
I'm changing the order because Rusty's here, so.
All right, I'm going to have another agenda motion. So if I can have a motion to make item 8, what is now 8B.
I'm really.
Now 8A. If I can have a motion to move 8B to now 8A.
Motion. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so now we will consider the new item 8A, which is approval of the capital budget 2019-2020.
So this is another important step in our budget process, and we have aligned our capital plan with what the town has asked us to do, which is a 7-year capital plan. So we always had done a 5-year capital plan. We've been asked to do a 7-year. You're going to see the plan is aligned to the recommendations of our K-8 facility review report. And if the board agrees, we will once again include our statement of needs when we when you approve the capital budget, including the FHS statement of needs, because these are urgent needs for.
They're the same thing.
I believe it's, yeah, that one.
Sorry,
I believe. I think one is technology,
This-
one technology?
this is the one.
Oh, that's the one we're going to
This
go
one just
through.
says buckets, so I just want to make sure I'm on the right one.
Yes.
Sorry.
And just so you know, and I know all of you have marked your calendars on January 22nd, we will have a joint meeting with the town council. It will be about the high school and the needs of the high school. So just important as we look at capital that we talk about FHS, because you'll see many projects for our K-8 schools and not many projects for FHS, because we're hoping to have some next steps by that January 22nd meeting. So Vince and Tim are here to present the capital budget request, and we also have Rusty here, who has been helping us, with the plans for some of the projects that we're doing here in district.
I just want to say, I think that January 22nd meeting might be a very important meeting to invite a delegation, the legislative delegation.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Kathy. Tim, thanks for coming up. Matt is here too, because Matt already talked about the capital improvement technology plan earlier, but it is obviously the first top priority in the board's proposed capital budget. And in a moment, I'm going to invite Rusty Malik up to the table when we get to the East Farms project. As Kathy mentioned, the capital budget this year is going from a 5-year plan to a 7-year plan. That was a request that came from the town council. So that's a change. Other than that, there are no other changes, and that cover sheet talking about the school district's capital improvement projects, it just says that a project must exceed $25,000 in cost and have a life expectancy of the item that must exceed 5 years. So we're going to go through this. I'm going to go through it as fast as the board would like, and at any point, please ask questions. It could be me, or I'm going to refer to Tim or Matt or Rusty, depending on any of these topics. So the buckets that we're going to be talking about are the technology, security, structural, architectural, the MEP, or mechanical, electrical, plumbing, code and safety, topic-specific projects, cafeteria equipment, FF&E, vehicles, and telephones. These are all, there are no new buckets, no new areas. Telephone was off last year, but that was only because it had come off from the years that we had done a major change to our telephone system. It's back on because Matt has advised we should start thinking about it for out years, because the life of that one is going to need to be upgraded again. So we'll click to the first slide. And the first slide is talking about the overall request. So the total request is that is being proposed is $2,802,000. And as Kathy mentioned, there's an asterisk on this total request, because the Farmington High School Statement of Need is going to be included. But many of these projects, and Tim, I know especially, is going to talk about it under MEP, it is not that we are going to be specifically requesting anything about Farmington High School for many of the issues that are needed up at Farmington High School. We do have a caveat to that under MEP that Tim is going to talk about, some of these just having funds available to the board to deal with some emergency situations that are happening. So we'll go to the next slide. So this is Farmington High School Statement of Need. I'm not going to read through it. It is the same Statement of Need that we have seen before.
Are you adding the statement of need to advocate for the budget advice?
Yes.
Want to make sure.
Good idea.
We're just going to keep
Everybody's
communicating our needs.
And there's the statement.
Added
We have read through the Statement of Need, and it was, I believe,
That's right.
I believed it was, the motion was adopted unanimously. So, and we'll go. Okay. All right, we'll go to the next slide, Matt. Thank you. Okay, technology, again, if anybody has any further questions, we've already looked at this evening. This is, it is important. This is in priority order that came from the central office. So technology is at the top of the capital request. Okay, are there any questions on the technology items Matt went through earlier this evening?
Just to be clear, it's in priority order, not inclusive of the Farmington High School statement of need.
Yes.
Correct? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Matt, we're going to click on security. The capital, board's capital request is proposed to be $275,000. At the bottom, and I will let Matt just say a couple words about an upgrade to the K-12 cameras that we're going to be doing.
So we piloted this year at both East Farms and Noah Wallace, newer camera system. We've both Tim and the police department have been going through looking at additional areas where we needed some video surveillance. We went back to our vendor. We were a little surprised at costs that came back, cost estimates for adding like 3 cameras. And it just so happened that I had been investigating some newer technology, again, back to the cloud solution stuff. New video surveillance technology has gone to, you install a camera, it's backing up to a cloud service, it's fully accessible from multiple locations. So at this point, the cameras that we have available at East Farms and Noah Wallace are accessible to our SROs when necessary, when granted access. Our principals and our security monitors can access them from their cell phones. The system has 2-factor authentication to keep the kids out, so they are secure. They are digital cameras with zoom capability. It is not it's not what we would describe as high-end video surveillance. It is something that's built for perimeter security, internal security, video surveillance of folks entering doors, et cetera. And just kind of to give you guys a little example on why we're advocating looking at this at all of the rest of our schools. Our contract is up in March with our existing vendor. It was a 5-year contract. We received estimates to add 3 or 4 cameras at East Farms. It was 4 cameras at East Farms. The cost to add 4 cameras with our existing vendor at East Farms exceeded the cost to replace all of the cameras, plus an additional 5 cameras with the new vendor by about $5,000. So it's a much more cost-effective solution. The ongoing yearly fees, it does have a license fee attached to each one of the cameras. The ongoing fees are significantly less than what we're currently contracted with our existing vendor. And the technology just keeps getting better.
It's also powered over Ethernet, so there's no power needing to be brought to the device. But what Matt says, what the SROs and the secure monitors love is the accessibility. Before, when they were our domain-based servers, bandwidth was an issue. So for a cruiser to come in and get onto our cameras, Matt was pulling his hair out trying to find bandwidth for everyone who wanted to use these cameras. This is just easy enough. I could pull up, Matt and I could look at East Farms, what's going on right at this moment on our cameras. So it's that easy.
One of the other features that's nice is that in the event that we have an investigation where we do need to release video to the police department, we can actually segment out just the portion which they need, and that's what gets shared. So we don't have to sit down and go through hours and hours of video with them any longer. Now we can really tailor it and set expirations as well.
So.
I think it's just a fabulous example of just ongoing work that we, always pre-planning. We knew this contract was coming up. We knew we needed to do something different, and there were some real financial issues. And, we're dedicated to efficiency, budget efficiencies at all times. It's just a fabulous example of everyone working together to get to, more efficiencies and just better access, especially in situations where we need our police department to have quick access, where we get it. We can get that and achieve it. So really happy with that.
Is there any questions about this capital bucket?
No.
Okay.
Make sure, the bucket is 275,000?
275,000 is the request.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, also including bollards around, perimeter. And then the public address systems are going to be upgraded. We have a new emergency alert system in our schools, and we have to update our PA system.
One quick add-on to what Kathy was just saying is reminding me of something. We are applying for the round 4 security grant reimbursement, with hopes that we could possibly even get some of this reimbursed.
We've had some success with that in the past, right?
A great deal of success, yeah. We always, because of the commitment the Ford has in the community to security, we always have a list of projects ready to go for these grants, so we're very fortunate.
The lights?
The lights, yes.
Yeah.
Reimbursement of all the lighting
Yeah.
project.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I am now going to invite Rusty Malik to come up and join us at the table. I'm just going to go through a couple of slides that I have, and then Matt has queued up in the background. Rusty has a couple of other slides, a little bit more detail about the East Farms offices relocation. The East Farms School security vestibule is a bonded project. It is a project that's in the board's capital bonding from last year. However, when after Quisenberry Arcari Malik was selected in our second RFQ as the firm to assist the board with these projects, and early work was done to really look at this project, some things came to light about the magnitude of the other items and the timing of doing these other items. And Rusty's going to be talking about them. I have with me the Fryer Reporter, the K-8 building report. And in the board's 5-year capital plan last year, there was certainly the discussion about other projects that were going to be coming down the road. And there was also the discussion during the budget season last year about the fact that East Farm School was going to, that's the last elementary school after West District has its main office moved this summer, that East Farms would be the last elementary school that has a main office that is in the inside of the school. It doesn't meet the best practices for school security and having a main office in the center of the school. So the proposal is to do a larger project, a project that's going to address the vestibule, some ADA issues at the front of the building, relocating the main office, and improving the media center, the program at the elementary school. So I'll turn it over to Rusty to go through the slides and the proposal.
Okay, good evening. What I'll do is I'll start by just giving you an overview of the site itself. You're all familiar with it. Wolf Pit Road is on the north side of the property, and you can see the north arrow. As you enter the site, what you'll notice is that really there isn't a clear definition of where the main entrance is, so unless you know where to turn, you're going to go and turn to the right, which would be the natural front of the building. But you can tell that I put a little arrow there to point out where the main entrance is, just to understand how one enters the building. There is some grade to this particular site, so when you come in, you come up the sidewalk and you go to the, can you go to the next, how do you move your stick? Okay. So you come up the main entrance and you either go to the right up the ramp, which is a non-compliant ramp, and enter over here, or you go to the left and you enter, and in either case, you buzz yourself in. You come into the main hallway and you're now in the school itself. Art is towards the front of the school. The courtyard, as you come in, you start heading down towards the main office. You've got art, you've got the courtyard, and then, of course, the main office, the nurse, and the media center is right there. Just to give you an overview of the building itself. So the entrance currently is not secured, and as I said, the ramp is not accessible. One of the things that we wanted to look at is what would happen if we created a secure vestibule, which is where this project started out. And we very quickly discovered that there's really no easy way to do it without creating all kinds of other issues as part of this project. You know, the natural thing one would say is, well, why can't we just put a little vestibule right there and make that a secure area of entrance? Well, that also happens to be a circulation point through the building, so everybody would be coming in and out of a secure vestibule just to get from one part of the building to the other. So very quickly we looked at that and we said that that's not going to work. The other thing is, it is really a classic case where you come in and this happens to be the main entrance, so if you're able-bodied, you come in that entrance, and if you're in a wheelchair, you go to the other side. You know, you go up that to the right side to enter the building, which is really something that the ADA frowns upon. That's not really the way we want to present ourselves. So this is just an overview of some of the issues we saw as part of this, of the analysis of the space. You know what, again, this is just defining how we looked at this in terms of how would you enter the building in this case. So let's go on to the next slide. So what happens in here, I've defined the area that's impacted by the proposed renovation here. But what would happen is as you came in, you go up a ramp and you come to this central point where you enter the building. So I'm going to just jump ahead, yeah. So here, that's a better. So one would come in off at the main entrance. You'd either come straight up the stairs to a secure vestibule right here, or you would enter here at the ramp. That would also bring you to the same secure vestibule. We're going to maintain the other access points simply because from an exiting point of view in code, those exits are required. So those doors would be maintained, except that this would now be just a level entrance point. So you wouldn't be coming down a ramp till you really came to that point to go down the ramp to exit out. One would come in to the secure vestibule. You'd come into the vestibule itself. The main office has a direct access, a sight line to whoever comes into the secure vestibule. There could be a transaction window there as well, so if somebody didn't need to go all the way through, they could just come to in the secure vestibule. And it's really a second point of reviewing somebody to see who's coming in, they're signing in, and then they're allowed to come into the main hallway, and then they would come and report into the main office itself. This is, as you saw earlier, was where the art room is. So we were able to reconfigure the art room to house the main office. You can see there's a principal's office here, a second office, a waiting area, and space for the front office staff to really interact with anybody coming in. Also off this area is the health room, along with the handicap accessible toilet and storage for those facilities. When one comes straight down that hallway, Currently, this area is the media center. Well, as we know, the media center is fairly small for the population. And as we look at this, when the main office comes into where the art is currently, we started looking at where, one option would be to put art back where the main office is, but it really doesn't function well. So we looked at where art would be best located, and here on the north side of this hallway, off this courtyard would be where art fits fairly well. There's plenty of room there. And in turn, we would move the media center from this space down to where the offices used to be, where the main office was. There are other support spaces, a workroom, and so on, the nurse. So this entire space now begins to function as the media center. And within the media center is also a large conference room. So it's, that's one of the requirements of that space, to be able to have a large conference room where you can have, 14, 16 people in that room in any kind of, in a meeting. It also works well being part of the media center itself. And then these functions that were where the media center is going move above it to where the media center was, including some storage rooms that are up along this hallway right here. So TL is a teacher's lounge. It allows light into that space. There's a courtyard right there. Again, a workroom, teacher offices, and then the art space itself. So by doing this, we're able to address all the concerns that have been expressed to us and what we've observed at these farms. And, we feel that it's the appropriate solution. One of the challenges was if we try to just do a vestibule, how would that work? And again, it really doesn't function. If you try to do it, the vestibule first, the addition would have to be larger, and then some of the work would have to be undone to put in the main office. So we were trying to come up with a solution that really addresses all the issues at the school.
Good work.
Thank you.
Looks nice.
Thank you, Rusty. Any questions? Yep, Liz?
So before we started, I think, Vince, you mentioned there was a timing issue. Is the timing issue that one of the things in the Fryer report was the undersized media center at East Farms? So does it make more, it makes more financial sense to do this all at once at this time rather than, is that the timing issue?
I would say the media center is a programmatic, but the ADA issues associated with all the ramp work and different things that are coming in, those, because ADA was its own whole part of the book. When all of these things, I think when Rusty started talking with me about this and started saying, he just used the words, you'd have to undo some work if you did just one of the projects. As soon as I started hearing that, I said, that doesn't make sense.
Right, I mean, that's what I mean, doing them all together. That's
Correct.
right.
Yes.
And also, if you did the vestibule, well, once you start doing that, you can't do it and have it not be ADA compliant. I mean, you have to. I mean, you have to do it and do it all the way, right? I mean,
The ramp is a necessity because you have to come into the building through, if you're creating a secure vestibule and yet have another access point that's not secure, it's defeating the purpose.
Right.
And this doesn't have a cost of $835,000. It's actually double that.
Times two.
Because it's 2 years. So we're bundling projects, but we're also separating the cost over a 2-year period. Just because it's a lot of money.
Was that the
But
original?
is that is this, so the 835 is in addition to what's already been bonded?
Okay.
So 835 times 2 is in addition to what's already?
We'll queue up an entire project cost.
Right, I just wanted to.
The amount of money that's been bonded is $375,000, but let me finish, $375,000 for 4 security vestibules, or $93,500 or something like that per security vestibule was a rough number to use for the security vestibules. So $93,500 is still there. This project is that second phase, the main office, and the programmatic work.
So I guess the question is it 835 times 2 minus 93,000?
No, you would add the 93. We have a chart for it, actually. Yep.
Keep at it, keep at it.
There it is. That's the estimated cost is the top line, and then the current.
Okay, so it's
appropriation-
adding the 93.
Correct. So the 93,000 is still there, and
Okay.
you would need the 2 appropriations spread out over 2
Okay.
years. Yep. And then you have the funds.
All right.
Ellen, yes?
So would this complete the issues in the fire report from East Farms?
No.
Not in entirety, because there are other issues at East Farms, but it would make a significant dent into East Farms, the issues at East Farms Elementary School.
Liz?
Would this, well, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but would this be eligible for any kind of state reimbursement money, any kind of,
Yeah.
Actually, it would. These are programmatic changes and security-related changes, so all the renovations would be driven through the programmatic aspect of it, and we anticipate it would be all eligible for full reimbursement.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 100% reimbursement of the 1.6?
No, so
No.
your rate.
30%.
At our rate, so 30%.
Okay, I'm like,
So around.
that right.
That's a good deal.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, but our
Yes.
rate.
Get Mike and Derek it back and thank them.
Okay, so
I know, right?
30%
I
reimbursement.
want to make sure, I just want to make sure I got that right, that's all.
So roughly.
People watching-
that's
For programmatic changes.
$50,000
Right.
of
Those questions.
reimbursement.
Okay, well, that's good, though. And
Taking a lot off the problems at the school, that's good. I know there's more, but.
Chris, may I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely. I just thought, Liz, you were pondering.
No,
Okay,
but
go
I
ahead.
lost my train of thought, that's fine.
Yeah.
So how much additional square footage did we get? 'Cause with the media center, and did you eliminate any offices? I didn't happen to count the offices in the last.
No, I think we
In the
did a
original diagram.
one-to-one
It was one-to-one,
switch. So we
okay.
did sit down with the principal, look over the plan. We didn't, when you say additional square footage be gained, you mean in the media center? You ended up gaining about 1,000 square feet there. So and it's not so much the square footage, it's also the proportions of the space, which make it more conducive to laying out the media center itself. So as you're gaining space, but in general, that long, narrow space as a media center works well as 2 classrooms, but it really doesn't work well as a media center.
Question for,
Yep, Bill?
okay. Have you discussed this with Kathy Egan and Joe Swetke? Are they aware of this, of what we want to do here?
We always first come to the board, have approval by the board, and then we meet with Kathy and Joe, and that's usually in February, correct? Right at, it's usually the month of February that we meet.
Well, the reason why I asked the question is this is a huge ask. And it's different than most of our other capital improvement projects. And it responds to the fire report. And my reluctance to consider this request is predicated on the fact that we have a significant number of asks that are in the fire report that I really believe requires town council input as we go forward. In other words, my initial reaction to this is, why are we going to referendum on this for a bond? Why are we putting this in capital, right? It's a $1.7 million project. Now, I understand there's a reluctance, maybe the town may not support that, but this places extraordinary pressure on the capital budget this year. So I'm just expressing my reluctance in that, and that's why I asked the question. I understand how we normally do it, but this is not a normal ask in a capital improvement request. I mean, we're looking at the previous years, there's no request like this anywhere, found in any of our capital improvement projects.
Well,
The last time we had a request this high was close to the new, was it the new auditorium?
It was when we were considering renovations.
That was
to the
8
auditorium.
million.
But that was never a capital improvement request. We were going to do our,
It was in our capital.
it wasn't all 8.
This is a process we go through to make the town council aware of projects, and last year we received over 4 million.
I'm
So
aware
it's
of that.
not in projects. So it is, the process that we go through, and really Joe looks at the financials and decides, is this going to be a bonded project? Is this going to be cash? You know, he makes those decisions based on, you know, our financial health and where we are. So it does go through this process typically.
Okay.
Chris?
Yes?
So just what I was going to say is that I think that typically the Board of Education's role is to determine what capital improvement projects are deemed appropriate for any given year. And I appreciate that the security vestibule was looked at and you determined that it wasn't feasible or responsible to only do a security vestibule at East Farms. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, at a minimum, you would be moving the administrative offices to have a functional, secure vestibule. Yeah.
And then you would have to undo some of the work to do another project and redo some of the work.
If you did that only, then you would not be undoing the vestibule work. If you just did the vestibule and did not move your main office, then certainly it would be work that would have to be redone.
It would have to be redone, right. So I guess that's why we're getting this. And then after, if we approve this tonight at the table, then the town manager is the one that looks at the capital projects and along with whoever else at the town side determines how or if those capital projects are going to be put forward to the town. So I don't think as the Board of Education, it's our role to decide what vehicle, if any, they're going to go forward to the town. So, I mean, I think it's just up to us to decide if if they need to go forward tonight from this table. That's the process.
Right. You know, I think, you know, with the K-8 facility review, we know now that we have about 20 years of projects that we have to put forward and tens of millions of dollars in projects that we need to request, and it's our responsibility to request. And, you know, then the town manager and the town council has their role as the fiscal body, but, you know, I think that was at least my understanding when we went through the K-8, you know, facility review. So this is, you know, we're going to every year put out our priorities, and some projects get pushed forward, some get accelerated. Like last year, we had a lot of projects accelerated, and we were very fortunate to get that done. And so you're going to see in the actual report in your packet that there's about, for the 7 years, there is this kind of new range that we're looking at of about a 2.7 to 8 million over many years. It's important that you look not only in this year but in the out years as well, because you're approving a 7-year capital budget, not just a 1 year. So it's important that you look at the document that kind of goes out years as well.
I have a question. So if we didn't move the media room, because we're seeing one concept design here, right? Obviously, moving the office to the front with the nurse's station is important in correcting the vestibule. So is there another concept design that doesn't move the media center and still utilizes the leftover space for the rest of those offices? And what was the implication of that?
There was, I mean, we looked at all the options as part of this exercise. And you can do that. You can, take the space that's being vacated by the main office and the health rooms to create an art room. You're sort of carving your space around an existing space. It's not it's not something that you'd really want to spend a lot of money just to create a sort of a minimally workable area for art. And I think the budget on that was about $750.
Can you go back a couple slides to the original without the changes? I think yeah, right there. Okay.
So what you'll see is that all of a sudden, now the space for art is going to be this sort of a narrow L-shaped space, and you don't really want to create an art room like that. And so then you start to carve out more room here in the teacher offices and the workroom, and saying, okay, well, how can we make this into a space that works and functions for art itself? So that begins to become more and more invasive into that space that we would be renovating.
Yeah.
But we
understand.
we fully explored that all the way to the level of
Okay.
looking at designs of just doing that.
Okay.
Yep.
What is the, oh, never mind, I'll ask later. Oh, wait.
Yeah,
One more, I'm sorry, Bill?
No, I'll wait.
Okay.
That question can wait.
okay. Thank you, Alex.
You all set? Okay.
I can see the lack of space now. I understand. Sometimes it's easier to see the options to come to the conclusion of the larger media center. So thank you for bringing me backwards first.
And there are mechanical and plumbing issues that are not obvious on schematics like these, that become obvious as you start really looking at the space. So if at any time you wanted to, do something with your media center, you're doing two things. One, you're going to take away the space that's probably the best space to locate your media center to, because if you're going to renovate that space for art now, you're not going to come back, in a year or so and say, okay, now we're going to take art out of there and move it again and put the media center there. That's the most appropriate location for the media center. So we were trying to look at it in the big picture as what the best solution for the entire school is.
You made it wider though, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Rusty, what are the logistics of building this out in terms of disruption timeframes?
It's going to be a little difficult in terms of a summer project. We might have to look at this in terms of how does this project extend beyond the summer? Is it something we can do to start it earlier in the year? Because there is, a portion of this right here is an addition to the building. There's a small addition to the building, about 200 square feet or so. And then the rest of it is all renovation. So, what we would do is we would phase it and really focus on what the priorities are that we have to have available to everybody, at the beginning of the school year. And, we haven't really gone into how many phases and what the time frame would be, but could it be done in a single summer? It is possible. It takes a lot of planning to get that done. I've taken on much larger projects than this and accomplished them in a summer. But it does, in most cases, we had to look to the Board of Education to favorably arrange the school year so that the school was out a little bit earlier and of course, started a little later. I know winters seem to have their own way with those sort of schedules, but within reason, that's what you have to try and do. Or look at projects that will be done and look at some of the spaces that can be renovated, continue to be renovated after hours that don't directly impact the students.
I think the biggest challenge in this project, and I could be wrong, but, would be, I could see moving the office and moving the art room. That, to me, would be a summer. But the media center is a challenge, and we would, honestly, it's not as vital. So we could do a library on a cart for a while. It's not ideal, but it's not like that is one of those spaces that would really impact, daily instruction. If, say, we were renovating classrooms or something, that would have a major impact. So I think,
I think that's a good point.
And what you have is the ability to access the media center from the exterior. So you could close that hallway off and renovate the media center and not impact the students at all. And there would be no interaction between contractors and, do all the infrastructure work in a way that you're ready to receive it all. And then the rest of the school year, even, so it may take till, let's say, October or November, that work can continue to happen.
That's a good point. I have another question.
Yep, Michelle.
Where's the additional 1,000 square feet, I think, is that what we said? So it's the added vestibule. Yeah, if you could just,
When I say additional, I mean, I was referring to the media center
Okay.
itself. There's more space for
Okay.
the media center.
got it.
Well, we're not going to walls down.
Yeah.
But I mean,
So, but the new space is the vestibule,
Yes.
right? The secure vestibule. And
The
then
secure
dimensions of the-
vestibule is right there, and this portion of the main office.
Right, that was there already.
No, this is not, this goes
That
straight
part there,
across.
right.
So this entire piece is an addition.
Yeah, I understand that. But there was no extra, where the media center now, is that the exact same footprint? or where the
Same
off-
footprint,
okay.
yeah. We're not expanding the
Okay,
building.
got it.
and just my understanding, the security vestibule, I mean, that's like a no, that has to happen, right?
yeah.
Like, I mean.
That's the original intent, security.
And it's a real challenge in the school because
Yeah,
you basically walk into a space where we would have to have students walking through the vestibule to get to lunch.
Yeah,
Our
they're right
kindergarten
there.
students would have to, actually, if we
Go
just
through the vestibule.
use the current footprint, would have to go through a vestibule to basically get anywhere in the school, the media center, the gymnasium, lunch.
pretty much negates
It just
the
didn't
purpose,
work
correct?
with
Right.
the
The doors open.
unfortunately. But I know you tried many different
No, we did look at all. We even thought about moving the entrance in the vestibule all the way up here, but then it doesn't make any sense in terms of the proximity of the main office to that space. So there's a lot of competing elements of that solution.
Any additional questions for Russ? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Russ. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Yes,
Thank you.
It's kind of cool, though, they're two important things. He doesn't know you. You could do it in a weekend, I bet.
So we're going to go to the structural architectural bucket. And I'll just, Tim, I know you've got a couple notes on it, but this is a bucket that has a couple of projects that we do right up front and a couple of projects that we begin building funds for that are larger and designed for that are coming in future years.
Yeah, so we started a phase in the Noah Wallace exterior last summer. The original main entrance, especially the dormer above and the actual, and the front of the building, all the casework on the front of the building, the frieze and the cornice, et cetera, was gone over and repaired, and that part painted. So we would continue along with that program on the rest of the school, as well as any masonry repairs, repointing and resealing. Some out-year examples would include the West District corridor flooring. Even though it looks nice and shiny, it's an asbestos, vinyl asbestos tile, which is safe when it's sound. But it's showing signs of wear now and cracks, and it has to be dealt with eventually. So there's funds for that. And of course, included with corridor flooring is the asbestos abatement that goes along with it, which probably rivals the cost of the actual new installation of flooring. Then there's the project design for the IAR cafeteria addition. This was also noted in the K-8 facilities condition report, and it's a major programmatic view that we're taking at Irving Robbins. And again, this is an out-year project that's going to require an extensive design to add seating to that Irving Robbins cafeteria.
Okay, any questions about the structural architectural bucket?
Questions?
Going to go to the MEP, district-wide mechanical, electrical, and plumbing bucket. Same concept. Some are, I've tried to put dates next to them to keep everyone informed about when we would think we'd do design or replacement, when these projects would happen. And then, of course, there is the placeholder, as I had mentioned, for deferred maintenance at FHS. But Tim, is there anything to talk about with and we have a couple of photos too. Matt, if you just click forward, I think one. Okay.
Right, there's a Union School elevator, and you'll see on the previous slide, they had the Union elevator replacement. This was again cited in the facilities review report that was completed last year. This would be the design this year, or replacement in 2021. And this step is purposely out a year because I'm confident we're going to be going with a service change, an electrical service change, a much-needed electrical service change that was already budgeted in this fiscal year. That'll be happening this summer. We'll be moving that school from currently a 400-amp single-phase service, which again is probably several homes, single-family homes in this town have that service, to an 800-amp three-phase service this summer. I've met with an electrical engineer, and I have a meeting this week with Eversource to finalize a design, so to speak, and come up with some costs. But it's well within the budget, maybe even under budget. So we're excited for that project. A new elevator, of course. The reason the one that's in there is so slow is because it's a single phase. This additional amperage, this additional service change not only increases the amperage, but the voltage that we can deliver to that building, which is going to increase the speed of the elevator. But that elevator is non-ADA compliant. A person in a wheelchair can't wheel themselves into the elevator because of the width of the door opening, not to mention the control panel is not ADA compliant. The second bullet that we have is the IAR heat AC rooftop unit replacement, and we're getting pretty close with the original building heating fan replacement that we completed there last year. It was probably a 1.5-year project where we went from the gas-fired furnaces to rooftop variable refrigerant flow heat/AC. We're close now to almost air conditioning that entire building. The reason it probably takes precedent over any other schools, even though our Tools for Schools indoor air quality survey that goes out to all the staff of the school, which we're in the midst of completing those reports now, points out the need for air conditioning in several of our spaces. IAR is a perennial gadfly for us with heat in classrooms in the summer months. In the spring, it gets up well into 90 degrees. So we're looking at a rooftop replacement that'll take care of 5 classrooms, and really there's about 10 left. So we could probably do this in 2 phases. So we would replace, obviously, the 5 classrooms that are south-facing on the front of the building that receive the worst complaints for heat. Noah Wallace Library air conditioning. We're down to a couple schools left that don't have the library air condition. It's a nice project to complete because it actually serves as an area of refuge as well on really hot days. So we'd be looking at that Noah Wallace Library AC. Westwood's dehumidification project design. I have a quote from an engineering firm for a design in hand. It's the entire design. It includes all the architectural services, not only the design, but construction administration, et cetera, for Westwood's dehumidification. If you're unfamiliar with that project, over the past few years, again, through our Tools for Schools and just through plain observation, I think there was they may be under designed that school for humidification control in the subterranean levels on that lower level. Because they don't, because they maintain their temperature so well, as you know, in your basement, you don't have to air condition your basement, it's pretty cool. But it also retains the moisture because it's not calling for air conditioning to remove heat. So there's dehumidification systems out there that handle that problem. And we have been plugging holes in the dike with indoor air quality issues for excessive moisture in classes in small one-on-one or special service areas with regular dehumidifiers that you would maybe buy for a home. They're emptied twice a day. There's so much moisture in the areas on there. And I think a lot of it is because we're pulling it from hallways and adjacent areas. So I think we need to treat that building globally with a dehumidification system. And then, of course, there's funds in this bucket for deferred maintenance due to the condition of the Farmington High School facility. We have to go along as if nothing's, going to happen. Even though we've deferred so many projects, we still have to treat them when they arise. And I could go on for a while on things that we could attack right now with a bucket full of money for this school. And, depending on how long till the shovel hits the ground, we may very well be addressing some of these issues. So,
thank you, Tim.
Yep.
Any questions on the MEP bucket?
Any questions?
This number is consistent with what we anticipated originally.
Yes, I think so. I mean, the Union elevator was definitely on the plan in the past. We've been talking about the heat and AC RTU replacements. The deferred maintenance item has been.
Okay.
Yep.
Any additional questions? Okay, thank you, Tim.
The next bucket is code and safety compliance. And we are proposing $90,000. I know Tim's got two fast examples on this to talk about. There could be many items, but the two examples.
Right, and the description really covers most of it anyway. I would just be piling on, but life safety equipment and structure. We have fire suppression and alarm systems that this addresses. You've seen this bucket for many years now. Emergency lighting, AEDs, emergency exiting hardware, and upgrades to fire-rated enclosures and pathways. We have a walkthrough with the fire marshal in town annually, and he gives us recommendations that we need to make for fire safety, whether it be, one clear example is at West District. He's revisiting the courtyards, and at Irving Robbins, he made this suggestion, and we completed this project last year, where the courtyard doors have to remain unlocked. That's fine if someone would jump on the roof at night, jump down into a courtyard, they can get into the building. So we asked him how to solve this problem, and the way it can be done is with magnetic locks that are on a timer, so that during occupied times, these doors always remain open because it can be used as a form of egress. If there was a situation in the front of the library near the main hallway, those occupants would exit into the courtyard and then out through the courtyard into another exit path. So those doors have to remain unlocked during the day. So it's a fire code. We have that same situation at West District and those small courtyards that we haven't tackled yet. So we need a new fire alarm panel at Union School. So those are a couple.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Tim.
The next bucket has also been on the board's capital plan for many years. This is cafeteria equipment. The board The board does own all of the capital equipment in all of the schools, in the kitchens. It is the property of the schools in the town. It is not Chartwell's equipment. So in this is a number that would assist in purchasing different items throughout the districts and the kitchens.
So basically saving up money to do it.
Any questions?
Okay. Thank you, Vince.
Okay. And the next bucket is FF&E. This is classroom furniture. And it's proposed to have $150,000. I consulted with Kim Nguyen, the district's furniture expert, and on this, and I put in here that first grade is the next grade level to be looked at. It's first and second grade that are the last two at the elementary levels that would need to have their furniture refreshed. So the next one earmarked is first grade. Any questions?
Any questions?
And then the last page is just giving a couple of examples about capital projects in out years. And inside of the board's packet, the best way too about doing this is looking at the document that has some highlights on it. That's the capital document. And then there's the entire packet of the capital detail, which outlines each year in progress and then 7 years out. But transportation comes into play in a couple of years. That's our policy to replace 2 vehicles that are 12 or plus years old and have more than 200,000 miles. So that's an out year. As mentioned earlier, the IAR cafeteria addition, replacement, expansion, however you want to look at it, it's to address the undersized and outdated cafeteria at the school. Project would add space to accommodate more students, thus reducing the number of required lunch waves. So it has a programmatic aspect to it, an important programmatic aspect to it. The project would also renovate the IAR kitchen and food service area, allowing for more types of food options to be available. Chartwell's has talked with me a number of times about how it's very limited at IAR with their serving areas. All of those items would be addressed in that project. That project is in the Fryer report too. And it is a project that has 2 years of similar to what we're proposing in regards to the East Farms project. It would be on the board's capital plan for 2 years, so that 1 year some of the funding comes in, the second year some of the funding comes in, and then that summer the project happens. That's the idea. Telephones, and the target is 2025 for when Matt has projected out the system would be upgraded again. And that brings us to the end of the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Vince. Bill, you wanted to read? Okay. All right, any other additional questions or comments from Mark?
Just a couple quick comments, because obviously this is more our recommendation to the council. And maybe this is probably just more of a comment than anything else. Last year we sent up a capital budget like this, and, we sent it to the council, and obviously they had their target set, and it was pretty high. And so we ended up sending a number of these items were bundled into a referendum, which ultimately passed overwhelmingly, and we were able to do a lot of the funding. My concern is this number seems to be almost in line with what we did last year, and this is really obviously our recommendation, and it's up to the council to do with it. My fear is that we may be in that same place where we could be looking at that as, hey, we may have to look at another referendum option to kind of meet these goals. And, I mean, do we know if there's even going to be an appetite to do that again, you know? And then, of course, looking at years to come, you know, obviously, we have a lot of these projects coming up that are probably going to be similar. And, you know, I'm wondering if there could be a conversation for maybe a different approach for the future, if we have all these projects, we know we're coming in and we know they're going to be expensive, about how the council may want to handle it, given the outcome of how things might happen this year. Because we don't know if they're going to be able to meet this. They may send it back. Do we have a plan B if they send it back? If there's no appetite to bundle another referendum like last year, because that was kind of a new thing they did, and we don't know if it'll happen again if they can't put this in. So it might be interesting to consider a different approach with the council, depending on what happens this year, because of the number of years that we're looking ahead, projected, that we had kind of an anomaly fix last year, and we don't know if that is going to repeat itself. So that would be my concern. That would be my comments. Obviously, this is our recommendation. It's in line with our reports that we've asked for, and it's up to the council, obviously, to let us know the fiscal appetite.
Okay, Liz? I'm sorry.
So,
No, I just, go back, Bill.
I think that, I mean, so this is the capital budget. So obviously, our job here is to put forth what we feel is in line with the needs of, the capital needs of the school system. And, I mean, honestly, our capital needs, we could put forth $10 million. So, or we could put forth $64 million. Obviously, we can't, that's not going to happen. The town manager is the one that's in charge of the capital budget and what happens to the capital budget and what gets put into the capital budget ultimately. All we can do as a Board of Education is recommend to the town manager ultimately what she then presents to the town council, who is acting as the Board of Finance, as to what they are going to consider for our capital budget. You know, Kathy has brought forward to us her, and the administration has brought forward to us the recommendations for the capital projects. And obviously, our school system has a great deal of need in the capital area based on, quite frankly, decades of neglect by this town on the capital needs of this school system. So I think that it is incumbent upon us as a Board of Education to put forth this capital budget and let the town manager and the town council, they will not send it back to us. It's the capital budget. Kathy Egan will decide what she wants to put forth to the town council, and then the town council will decide as the Board of Finance what they would like to do and how they would like to present it to the town. It is out of our hands. All we can do is what we would like to present as the capital needs of this school district, which are much greater than what is here before us tonight.
Okay, you done? You all set?
Yeah.
Okay, Bill?
I would kind of, I'll just say that I agree with Liz that, and I've always taken the position that our role here as the Board of Education is to put forth and really just kind of present to our community what our excellent professionals think is what we need to educate our kids correctly and properly and safely in the right schools. So that's how I feel, just as a general principle. But we're faced with a different situation now, not of our making, but it is nevertheless the situation we find ourselves in, where you look at the end of that 7-year out, and it's almost $32 million we're going to be asking for capital improvements to our community over the next 7 years. And so everything that I saw tonight, with the exception of the East Farms project, I'm 100% in favor of Those are absolutely things that came back as part of our ordinary, normal business of reviewing the reports that we get, listening to our staff and our administration, and putting forward what we need. What I'm afraid of is that without a plan going forward on how to handle the significant infrastructure needs identified in the Fryer report that are kind of articulated in that 7-year out plan with a $32 million ask in capital improvement, when the overall number is $64 million. I'm reticent. I think there needs to be more dialogue between our board and the council, because what I don't want to do is get into a place where we're going to start setting precedent of responding to the needs of the fire report and through capital projects, and then begging whoever the council is in 4, 5, 6 years, whatever that makeup is, to keep it going. Essentially, that's what we're asking, is to keep if we start down this road, that's fine. We're going to be asking everyone to keep it going, because if we miss a year or two, then everything that we're doing now, 5, 6, it's gonna jam up, right? There needs to be a plan in place that's bipartisan, that understands that this is an overall need for the community, that has to kind of survive this board and the next council and the council after that. And so, to my way of thinking, there needs to be a little bit more consensus and a little bit more working together, a little different than normal. This is different. This is different than how we normally do things. And maybe I'm not articulating it very well, and I apologize given the hour and given the day I've had.
You didn't make it.
No, right. I told you it was going to be worse. No, it's just, I feel like if we're going to really dig into the Fryer report, which we should, and there's an absolute critical need for us to do so, I'd rather not do it, as Mark articulated a little bit, with, here's our capital, this is what we think is necessary and appropriate, please give it to us. And then if the council turns around and says, well, we appreciate that, but we can't do it this year, we're going to be chasing it. And then we're going to be hoping that some of this falls to referendum, and then we're all going to be out hustling at referendum time. And then we don't, again, it's not our job to understand the long-term impact of bonding and financing, right? But I think as residents and taxpayers who kind of follow the stuff, we know what that impact's going to look like. And I just feel like there needs to be more buy-in, more consent, buy-in is the right word, because there is buy-in from the council, more consensus to how to handle the challenge. Right now, I don't feel like we have that. And I want that as part of this going forward. Yeah, you understand what I'm saying? I mean,
I understand. I think everybody is saying kind of the same thing. I think everybody is of a like mind. And, if I hear lack of ADA compliance one more time, anything, it just makes my skin crawl. I mean, it's shameful that we still have these issues. So I think Mark, Liz, and you we're all kind of, and I'm kind of on the same page with all of you. I think we're all the same mindset. I'm just wondering, procedurally, the procedure vehicle is, I don't know if we're going to solve that tonight.
No, I understand.
We have to. This is the embodiment of a lot of hard work, as you said, Kathy and Vince and Tim and the Fryer report. And I think maybe we need to push this forward as is and do what you're saying, Bill, and engage and try and find some solution. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with that. Yeah, no, I think
you got what I was trying to say.
I like.
So
go ahead, Michelle. We'll let Michelle go.
So I appreciate how you expressed that, because
I don't think
that was in my thought. Like you said, we put it. But I thought we have a statement of need of what we need. Why not have a statement of intent on how we manage to tackle it, and we accompany it with the statement of need? And it works in collaboration with what you're saying and what you're saying. How do we present all of how we intend to put it through budget to budget? I mean, I'm trying to get my head around this new capital number with the school. Like, I see the reason that we're going that direction with that conceptual design, but that's a far bigger number than we had originally intended. So, we can cross our fingers that it will come back, but maybe with more of that conversation of intent on how we plan to lay it out over this period of years, that we have more of the collaborative mind and how we're going to attack it, because it's huge. So my thought was statement of intent to how we wanted to go forward with it.
I just wanted to respond to Bill. I totally agree with everything you're saying. My concern is that I don't want to get the process of tonight, I agree with Chris, like, we need to get through the process of tonight
Right,
first.
right, yeah.
And then move on to exactly everything you said. I agree with everything you said, but after tonight.
Right, I understand that, but I guess, and I'm not looking to hang on, trust me. Last thing I want.
no second reading.
Anybody who knows me, right, knows that I have no interest or desire to hold this here any longer than we absolutely have to be here. But I really, and I don't feel like I articulated it very well, but I really feel like this is the issue for us more than anything else, is what are we going to do? You know, we can look back in time and point fingers and why did we get here? It doesn't really matter. We have to solve this problem right now. We have to begin that process of articulating a plan. And I'm just saying that I am reticent to the concept of we come back every year with $3 to $4 million capital improvement requests. I don't think that's fair to the Board of Ed budget, frankly, because then you're going to get this increase that's to some degree almost artificial, because you have your normal operating,
It's cash.
right? It's cash, but it's right.
If it's
So
bonded, right.
right, if it's bonded, it's not, right? So then you have this, but you have to articulate it. So you have this image of what a school budget's going to look like that's not a true reflection of really what we're asking for in terms of increases, and overshadows things like increases in self-insurance, overshadows increases in benefits going up. So then you have this competing kind of concern of we've got on one side of the house these capital improvements, and on the other side of the house you've got these operating expenses, everything's going up. But it's not really like that in a way it's going to play itself out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I do think on January 22nd, we're going to talk about what the facility and finance ad hoc, as well as the survey ad hoc, came up with. And there are numbers out there for many, many years to come on some estimates of what an average increase would be in the town's operating, and the board's operating, in debt service, and in capital improvements. They've actually played this out for, I think, 20 years, something like that, given a large high school project.
Right.
So they have actually considered this in that committee. Is it exactly what we're putting forward? No, but I wouldn't say it's so far off either. You know what I mean? I do think that committee did a nice job at looking. They came to us, they said, you know, what, to get that prior report, all those recommendations completed, what would that look like? They took our numbers, and I believe that they considered them and made some adjustments. You know, but there is, you know, a plan going forward, or at least one that was presented by Joe to that particular ad hoc. So, you know, I feel that, you know, each of us, I play a role, the board plays a role, town manager, town council, and I think from my perspective, my role, I have the responsibility of saying to all of you, here are our needs. I can't hold back on those. I have to be clear, and I think at times we did hold back in the past because of you know, worrying about what the impact would be, but then we had to face, you know, those K-8 reports.
Well, the bills do now. We could see it
oh
right
my
here.
goodness, you know, that this is unfortunately the impact of holding back. And so we, you know, I felt that I needed to put out there what we would need over time to make a dent in these reports, and also to improve our facilities, where 4,000 children are educated every day. And we provide an excellent education, and we want our facilities to mirror that education that we provide. And, you know, are there different ways of doing this? Absolutely. There are ways, and I don't think it's a bad idea to have a committee that looks at this, but you can do it in the way we're doing it here.
Right.
You can do it in large projects that you bundle. There's lots of ways of doing that. I think for me, you know, the priority of the high school weighs heavily on me, and I'm sure on all of you. And so I'm trying to find this balance of, there's a big project out here, but yet we're trying to get some projects done over here over time, and trying, you know, to do it in, you know, a responsible way. So I don't disagree with all of you in saying this probably is a much larger conversation, but I also know the priority of our conversation right now is the high school. And trying to
That's in my mind.
address that.
And that's what's on my mind as I talk about this.
Yes.
Thank you, Kathy. All right, I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm ready.
and I would just say that you're right, because with the high school looming out there, if we haven't even gotten to that yet, and if we're going to find ourselves in a situation of another referendum for school projects again, it's a slow drip that people are going to take negatively as more bigger and bigger projects come, because at some point, people are going to say, what's going on? Why do these things keep coming up? And it just weighs down the morale of the public to have to keep seeing this all the time. And there should be at least another look at how to do this.
Well, I just want to say, I think it's going to be really, really important in the presentation to the council, but also to the community. This is a new day. We are at the tipping point, as Bill said, that the bill is due. So, I guess what I would hope going forward, and to Mark's concern, I agree, we can't just have the council, well, the council is they're informed, but the community thinking we're bringing this capital to the council and, without explanation. I think they're going to have to hear it over. We're going to have to be very transparent that these increases are due to you call them something different now. That was the Fryer reports.
Well, we're trying.
I like the new name, I just don't have it down yet.
It's a K-8 facility
Yeah,
review
it's
report.
better.
because,
It's better.
We don't want to.
It's more.
I don't know. We start to sometimes use,
Well, it doesn't have any
people
meaning that way.
Yeah, we're
Right.
just trying to.
Right, it's Fryer report is lingo.
There's no meaning that way.
But it's going to be in the presentation, that we have to explain ourselves and, where this is coming from. And I think we also have to explain that this is the way it's going to be for, the next 20 years to 30 years, due to neglect. And I think they just have to hear it. It's not due to neglect?
I'll just say it's not going to be the best campaign to get out there.
It's information, it's being transparent, it's not a campaign. I think it's just the way we present it.
And, I mean, obviously, I've learned a lot in this last year, but, the things that I've heard over and over again, I wasn't part of these other processes, was just the fact that, we have let our buildings go, and, people are frustrated about that, and, now that we got this, facility report in my first year, so this is what I'm basing my opinions on, was I think you did a really great job with, this plan, because it's trying to address, two things that need to happen that are very important at one school. And where I see where your frustration comes in with, like, we do have this high school project looming. I also hear what you're saying but we have to, at some point, even though we know that the high school project is there, we have to start somewhere with all of the things, you know what I mean? Like, we have been, but obviously it's a much bigger number than anybody anticipated, but starting somewhere with these big projects, it's, like you said, people are going to have to realize that these aren't going to go away. We have a whole book full that we're going to add next year, whatever ones we can. And, this one just happens to be smart because we're trying to do, two things together, so that did make the number so much bigger. But obviously the security has to happen. So sometimes, I see why you're doing it this way. I totally do, because it's addressing two big issues at once, one of which you can't put off. And it does seem silly to redo work, when you can try to avoid it. So it's a lot to take in, but I appreciate how y'all presented it.
Any other questions or comments? All right, can I have a motion to approve the 2019-2020 capital funding projects as presented?
Motion.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? It's approved.
We need to do a motion.
Yeah, And I'm in uncharted territory, but I need a motion to extend the meeting past 10 o'clock.
Motion. Chris, you're slipping.
I knew you would. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Sorry, Bill. I tried. I mean, the one night, we get a full agenda, the one night you don't want.
Now you abstain, you object.
I just abstained.
Okay, next item on the agenda, now if I can read my agenda still.
Which way are we going? A or B?
Okay, we're going to 8, now the 8B, review of revisions to policy 6146, graduation, first reading, right?
So this
You got it right?
has a connection to our first agenda item, which would be mandates. So we do have new state requirements for the graduating class of 2023 and beyond. And this has been pushed out quite a bit from way back. I couldn't even give you the original date of this. It was so long ago that new graduation requirements, one of which is increasing the number of credits to 25, were put in place many years ago. And each year it would come back to the legislators and we would ask for an extension as school leaders because this is a very heavy lift to increase credits for most districts. It's very challenging. You definitely often have to change your schedule. Many districts have had to hire additional teachers to try to get to these requirements. So in some ways, an interesting example here at the meeting about what we were saying to our representatives. So I have to really commend Kim and our department leaders, our high school principal, working together along with Veronica on mastery-based learning, student choice, our vision of the graduate, because all of these things have prepared us for these new requirements, which are not as heavy a lift for us. Even though, if you were to ask HAPS, the organization that represents superintendents, do you think this should go in place with the freshman class next year? They would say, please postpone it, because many districts are not able to achieve what's being asked in those state level requirements. So with that, Kim will do an overview of the change in requirements, including this additional credit requirement.
So, as Kathy said, the biggest change is increasing the number of credits students are required to have for graduation from 22 to 25. The good news for us is that 90+% of our students already have that many credits when they graduate. So we aren't really too worried about that as an overall requirement. We will certainly be very deliberate and intentional in advising parents and students when they enter school about these new requirements and making sure that as a part of the annual meeting that parents and students have with their counselor, there's always this monitoring and checking along the way to make sure you're on track for meeting all of the requirements. We're very lucky in that way as well. Not every high school, not even close, has the opportunity for parents and families to meet with the counselor once a year. So you'll also probably notice that the credit distribution requirements have shifted. So before you would have seen this list, and you have that, the existing and still in place graduation requirements until the class of 2023. But you see, English, math, science listed out separately. There's an effort from the state to kind of bundle and bucket courses into humanities and STEM. I do appreciate the push to get districts to be thinking more about interdisciplinary learning and for students to have more choice and less rigid distribution requirements. So we took a long and careful look at, where we think our students should have that kind of flexibility and choice, and other things where we still feel like, no, we want to be sure students have four credits in English. and we're going to remain with that requirement. So I'm not going to go through each and every line. You can see it here on this chart, but that is one of the substantive changes, is that things are, in terms of distribution, they're in buckets more than in single disciplines. The language in Part B on the next page of demonstration of proficiency in basic skills is also something that we hadn't had before. What you saw before was how students were to meet standard in each of the areas. This new policy requires students to demonstrate a level of basic skills in literacy, math, and science. And here we feel very good about our progress in terms of mastery-based learning, because we truly believe that our courses now are so clearly focused on the essential content standards in each course that a student who receives a grade of C- or better is meeting those basic skills requirements indeed. But we put other language in here because it may be that, a student, we just never know, a student might want to meet these basic skills requirements in other ways, so you see PSAT or SAT benchmarks. And finally, we did some analysis of last year's graduating class, just, to give you an example. And there would have been 3 students, but 3 is too many, there needs to be 0. Students who would not have met these requirements as stated in A, B, and C. So we put in D, a portfolio review and assessment of student work, to give the teachers in the discipline the opportunity to look at the student's performance and perhaps require that the student do A, B, and C more to demonstrate basic skills. So there's that in there. We don't want to jeopardize, unnecessarily so, any students' potential to graduate on time. I won't go through each and every of these other parts. There are some pieces that we added here just for clarity's sake that weren't in the policy before, but we've looked at policies from other districts across the state, and we looked at the Shipman and Goodwin model policy, and some of this language, for instance, in Part C, students receiving special education services, it's really there for clarification. We've not shifted direction or changed the way we're doing business. It's just there for clarification. And so some of these other components here for that reason, like a hearing impaired component. So I guess the only other opportunity for our students that we've included in this policy that you wouldn't have seen in the past, and I think is an advantage to our students, is the seal of biliteracy, which we're already offering to our students. But we wanted our students to be able to put that seal of biliteracy on their transcripts when they're applying to colleges. And the requirements from the state tell us that the student must pass the biliteracy exam, but then also have 4 years of English credit, which would mean they'd be exiting seniors by the time they were to achieve the seal of biliteracy, and that wouldn't advantage them at all in the college process. So we were told by the state, that is, and the language here is very explicit, that a student who is demonstrating that he or she is on track to successfully complete the 4 credits in English can be awarded that seal of biliteracy during that process, and then it's officially on the transcript when they graduate. So then, after that part of the policy comes the existing policy, and then you also will see the administrative regulations that go along with it for the class of 2023 and beyond. Again, I can't point to anything very different here. The only thing you'll see is some kind of cleaned up language around alternate pathways, to be clear that in our school system, we do provide a pathway for students to be more self-directed in their learning and open up the door to other ways of attaining and acquiring credits in the form of online coursework or field studies or independent studies or research projects. But we've maintained control, if you will, so that someone is overseeing those choices students are making and approving them in advance and making sure they're of high quality, commensurate with the coursework being offered in our regular program of studies. So I know you might have taken a closer read before you came here tonight. If there's any questions you have about anything in particular, I'd be happy to try to answer it.
Thank you, Kim. Any questions, Liz?
I had a question about the I withdrawn credits due to poor attendance section. So, I mean, I have no problem with it as written. I have a question about how students and/or parents are notified about what the fair system of withholding graduation credits is. It doesn't give any indication about how parents or students are told what that system is.
I believe it's in the program, it's in the handbook.
Okay, but
And
should it
there
say
are-
it in the policy that such system is in the handbook?
Should be in the handbook, that system.
Yeah.
That, I wonder.
Or wherever it is.
Yeah, I wonder if that maybe belongs in administrative regulation, because that's more the part of a policy when you talk about the implementation of the policy. But that is, that's certainly something we can find and be clear about and either put it right in there or reference where a parent would find that information.
I just want to make sure it's in some policy. I want to make sure that if the principal is the one that's going to establish the system, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I just want to make sure that parents know where to go to find the system.
Right. It's in our current policy exactly in the same way, but
Right.
it might, we always want to improve, so.
I just don't.
Right, it might be better to have some detail about that in the regulation.
And just piggybacking on Liz, when you read that, what's excessive?
Well.
There's some
Right.
lawyers in us,
Oh,
right?
they have a certain.
Define excessive, I mean.
Yeah,
Well, I
they
think
do.
that would be in
No,
the-
they have a percentage they
Yeah.
follow and.
Right, I think that's probably, that's going to be
An
defined in the system. That's why I
It
want to
is.
know where to go to find the
Okay,
system.
yeah,
Find the system.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. All right, any additional questions for Kim? Okay. That being none, can I have a motion to approve the first reading of revisions to policy 6146, graduation?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Mark's away from the table. Okay. All right, next. Jumping ahead. Okay, next item, item 9, consideration business administrators report. Approval of the November 2018 financial report.
Again, it's really special education items that continue to have some pressure on the budget. Aides, special education nurses, nursing services, consultation services. Summer school program, that was extended school year, some additional fees in special education for extended school year services. The page, health insurance pages that I talked about earlier, I won't go into detail, but there's more detail about the results in just the first couple of months for the self-insurance fund, which you can see on the last page. And the fund is in a very good position. So, this is while concerning, it is not, we certainly have met our reserve, and we're fine with the self-insurance fund. I think my last comment is that grant funds have been coming in, and on the board's next, on the December financials that the board will see, we'll have all of the grant numbers all locked in. And they have trended a little bit higher than what we were expecting.
Any questions for Vince? Michelle?
What's falling under consultative services?
Consultation services?
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, consultation services. You could have under consultation services, one of the biggest items is CCSN. That's our contract with a provider that assists with our specialized learning centers here in district. That's the biggest item. But you could also have under consultation services our evaluations that would be under there if Dr. Singer was to order specific evaluations or services, that would fall in that area. Those are the biggest ones. Evaluations for if a student is going to get other services or could be diagnostically placed.
So you're placing that in that same category with, why you have the need for more nurses, why you have the need for more transportation money? Is it all around the special needs, or is it all around?
Right now, the drivers to the budget are in the special services department, yes. All of these
And that's where you're putting
categories.
consultative?
Yes.
So you're putting
Yes.
that in that service?
Yes.
That's a big number.
I know. In some cases, though, we do, we do get reimbursement funds, especially in special education nursing services. We'll get Medicaid reimbursement. In some cases, if a child is a Hartford student, we get billed back services, reimbursement. So there's some reimbursement that comes back, and excess cost, too, for our high needs.
But this is not net, right? Like if you have...
Well, consultation services, we have already
That's already-
begun to apply expected revenues for.
Okay.
Yep. Because I do have indications on what we can expect for excess cost. We've already filed our CDAC for the year, so I do have an expectation for what the excess cost reimbursement's going to be.
Okay.
Yep.
I mean, some of those lines, you even now, we apply expected revenues, so the budget is lower than what we will expend in those particular lines, because when we build the budget, we would never budget at the amount we think we're going to expend and then get revenues to offset it. We say, okay, we're going to get, we estimate we're going to get this revenue. So in some ways, these lines go over, and they're expected to go over, and then we're going to, apply revenues.
Correct.
So, but they're probably going over more than what we anticipated.
A little bit, yeah. They are going over more than anticipated, but not to the level that we can within other areas within the budget. It's not, it's concerning. Trends are always concerning, but not overly concerning to me. It's just things that we need to talk about and work on to improve.
Okay. Any additional questions for Vince? Okay, thank you, Vince. Can I have a motion to approve the November 2018 financial report?
Motion.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, next item on the agenda, 10, reported board chair. I think, just a couple things. One, we're entering budget season, so just make sure everybody, clears their schedules for all the meetings that will be coming up. But secondly, I think, and most importantly, was highlighted during the discussion on the capital is the joint meeting coming up next week. I think that you saw that that's going to be vitally important as we go together with the town council and the town trying to address these needs along with the high school and everything that we have on our plate in terms of our infrastructure improvements. So if everybody can make that meeting, be greatly appreciated as maybe step one of an ongoing dialogue to resolve these issues. So if you can do that, that'd be great. Next item, 11, consideration committee reports. A, personnel negotiations. Mark?
We actually have some news because we reached a tentative agreement with the union. They are scheduled to meet on the 16th to present the tentative agreement to their committee members, to their union members, and they will, I guess, vote at that meeting to decide if they will agree to it. And then I think at some point we will be having our own meeting to discuss it, and we'll leave it's the 28th at this point. So more to come as we learn what happens on Wednesday.
Okay, great. Thank you. Policy, Christine?
We have nothing scheduled right now.
Okay. C, curriculum, Michelle?
We met tonight at 5:30, and we discussed two categories that we'll see on the budget. The curriculum development proposals for curriculum revisions, obviously, and looking forward on how those will come. And then also the professional development proposals. So we've got some good layout for it. I think it seems very good and reasonable.
Thank you.
And our next meeting is scheduled for April 15th.
Thank you. D, communications, Ellen?
Rich has been working on the winter newsletter. I understand it's gone through a couple of drafts and should be getting out to the community later this month.
Great. Can't wait to see him. All right, item 12, report of committee liaisons. Correct, no report. B, Farmington High School survey ad hoc. Bill, Chris,
We're meeting, you said we're meeting
Yep.
next Thursday,
Yep, so we're all
What's that
set.
date?
22nd.
22nd. And financial ad hoc will,
Same thing.
same thing.
22nd. And that's here, that's in the library. I mean, in the cafeteria.
Cafeteria, yeah. Okay, D, focus.
Was in communication last week with Nancy Parent. Our next meeting is February 13th. Kathy, she did kind of inquire a little bit about meeting with me before we sit with our budget. She's looking for, to the extent we can offer some help to her budget. She's looking for, I mean, she may have communicated with you.
She has,
Okay,
so
all right.
I think she's going to set up a meeting with Mary to talk with me about
Good,
it. Yeah.
okay, great.
Okay, thank you, Bill. E, Farmington Public School Foundation.
I have not seen anything on another meeting on this, have you? No, okay. No meeting scheduled.
F, Interscholastic Athletics Advisory Committee. Christie?
Our meeting is at Noah Wallace before the next board meeting on the 28th, so.
Q. G, Chamber of Commerce. Michelle?
Okay, so our chamber is planning, we have a community pizza event, which is intended to create a scholarship for a high school student. That's scheduled for March 26th. The whole community is invited. So that's something that's coming up. Another thing that the Farmington Chamber is working on with Bike Friendly Farmington, and I know we have elementary bike riders one day, right? Our bike ride program, but they're looking to work with the town to have bike stands in town, things like that, so to encourage our community to bike.
Great.
And I think that'll be meaningful for some students,
Yeah. Okay, thank you. H, Green Efforts Committee. Andrea?
Nothing new to report. The next meeting's February 5th.
I, Ad Hoc Cafeteria. Liz?
Nothing new to report. Next meeting's March 4th. It's still 6 PM here, right? Even though are we anticipating having the change by then? Or is it going to be the new name and new committee?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think
all
we
right.
can make that happen.
All right, we're going to
And I
make
think
that happen
and-
before March
and
4th.
we have a student. We have a student.
We have a student?
Yes.
We're inviting students and parents.
Yep.
Changing. It's not the ad hoc cafeteria
I know
anymore.
we have to
Yeah.
put a motion in the next, I have to write it down.
Okay, okay.
So we have to actually
Change it?
change
All
it.
right.
Yeah.
The board has to vote to change.
We're going to be changing it, okay. How exciting.
2 more meetings to get them done.
Okay, J, Health and Wellness. Ellen?
No report.
Okay. Have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Yeah,